life for all citizens through sound fiscal management and legislative actions. In an ongoing effort to increase transparency, your Board of Supervisors holds public meetings to garner citizen input before making important decisions. Here's tonight's meeting agenda. Stay tuned. The Board of Supervisors meeting will begin shortly.
Good evening. I'm actually going to call the meeting of the James City Service Authority Board of Directors. Good evening, Mr. Powell.
Good evening.
I'm going to call that meeting to order. If you could call the roll, please.
Ms. Sadler.
Here.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Here.
Mr. McGlennon.
Here.
Mr. Hippel.
Here.
Ms. Larson.
Here. See, we have no presentations this evening. Do we have any public comment?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Our consent calendar this evening consists of minutes adoption. May I please have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. All of those opposed? All of those in favor? Aye. Sorry about that. We do have one public hearing authorizing abandonment of a portion of easement, Colonial Heritage Force Main relocation. Mr. Powell, if you have a staff report.
At your June 23rd meeting, you approved an agreement with Colonial Heritage LLC and the Colonial Heritage Homeowners Association to relocate a sewer force main. That project has been completed, and JCSA now needs to abandon part of an easement. Staff recommends approval of the resolution that authorizes the abandonment and conveyance of that easement back to Colonial Heritage.
Thank you. With that, we'll open the public hearing. Do we have any speakers this evening?
No, ma'am.
Okay, with that, we'll close the public hearing, and I'll look to the board for discussion and/or a motion.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Mr. Powell, if you could call the roll.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye. Thank you. That brings us to board considerations. Number one is contract award, manhole and wet well rehabilitation services. Mr. Powell?
Thank you. An RFP was issued for manhole and wet well rehabilitation services, which is an activity that's required by the consent order. JCSA has about 10,000 manholes, and that must be inspected once every 15 years, and another 70 lift stations with wet wells. Defects discovered during these inspections must be rectified promptly. 3 firms responded to the RFP. 2 of the firms were selected, East Coast Infrastructure and Visosewer East, LLC. These contracts have an initial 2-year term with the potential to renew for 4 additional years. Staff recommends approval of the resolution awarding the contract to East Coast Infrastructure and Visosewer East, LLC.
Thank you. To the board for discussion and/or a motion.
To approve.
Thank you. Mr. Powell?
Ms. Sadler? Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye. Thank you. Second item is setting a public hearing, fiscal year 2022 utility rates. Mr. Powell?
This item comes before you every year. In accordance with the 2020 rate study, the proposed FY22 budget increases the water service rate and the water fixed charge 3.5% to maintain adequate revenue, to maintain our infrastructure, and prepare for future costs for an alternative water source. The proposed budget does not recommend any changes to the sewer service rate or sewer fixed charge. It does recommend an increase in the grinder pump maintenance fee from $350 a year to $375 per year. Under the proposed budget, the water fixed charge would increase $5.23 a month, would increase from $5.23 a month to $5.41 per month. The first tier rate would increase from $3.62 a month to $3.75 a month. For a typical customer that uses 5,000 gallons of water per month, the monthly bill would increase 93 cents from $43.84 per month to $44.77 per month. This represents an overall increase of 2.1%. The combined bill would be the third lowest among the 18 Hampton Roads localities, and JCSA would continue to have the lowest water rate among the 18 localities in the region. Staff recommends approval of the resolution that authorizes the advertisement of the public hearing on these utility rates for April 13th, with the rates being effective July 1st.
Thank you. Look to the board for discussion or a motion.
Question?
Yes, sir.
The grinder pumps, I know we always talk about it every year because I know we're at a loss with the grinder pumps.
Right.
Can you refresh my memory what that loss is? I'm sorry to not have asked you earlier.
That's okay. I don't have the exact numbers. We're getting closer to even, but we're still probably in the tens of thousands of dollars shy. But we didn't want to make up the difference all at one time because it would have been such a big difference. So we're trying to get there incrementally.
Okay. If you could send us something just
Sure.
to say within the next X amount of years, we should be, breaking even. I know we're not looking to make a profit on it, just to help the citizens, but where our break even point would be at this rate, where we'll be.
Okay.
Thank you.
We can do that.
Yes, sir.
Other questions? Is there a motion to set the public hearing?
So move.
Thank you. Mr. Powell?
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower? Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye. Are there any board requests and directives? All right, seeing none. Mr. Powell, you have your general manager's update?
Just a couple things I wanted to mention. Nothing particularly remarkable in the dashboard report this month, other than you might have noticed there was a fairly significant decline in residential delinquencies, which is a result of the CARES Act funding that we got. And secondly, I would just mention, I think our billing issues are improving, but we do still have some issues. I was made aware late last week that we did have one neighborhood in particular that received their December bill just recently. So we are still having some issues with the post office and delivering our bills on a timely basis. But to the best of my knowledge, the January bills went out on time. So I think we're getting close to getting back on a normal schedule. I would add that we have extended for the November and December bills, we had said there would be no late fees, and we are extending that due to some of the issues we've had more recently. So we're still not assessing late fees at this point.
Okay.
And, Madam Chair, if I could, Mr. Powell, thank you for notifying me about problems that Newport News Waterworks seems to be having with some of their billing, where people hadn't received a bill in 3 months. I know that there were several folks in my district that were affected by that, and so I just hope that Newport News will make sure that they reach out to folks and let them know what's happening so they can plan adequately.
I will relay that to my counterpart in Newport News.
Question?
Oh, go ahead.
Is that the HRSD bill?
The Rubs bill, yes.
Right.
For us, the combined
For
bill,
us.
yes.
But
yes.
it's not due to anything that we've done.
It is
kinda
not.
there.
It is not due to anything that we've done. It's
Right.
It's a combination of factors, but it's not. Our main role in the process is to read the meters, and we've been reading the meters on time.
Okay, because when you spoke about, our bills are, I don't want the citizens to think that
Right.
your bills are late and it's
Right.
our job to read it, but it's their job to get them out.
Right.
And even though the money comes back to us, it's not our staff that's missing that.
That's correct. Yes.
I had one question on, not relying on the post office because I'm getting mail now that was mailed in early December. But I went on and tried to sign up for online, paperless billing, and it was not intuitively obvious how to get there on the HRSD site. I think I finally got it done. We'll find out.
Okay.
But I wanted to bring that up because it's, for our citizens who might want to deal with that issue by doing paperless, we need to look at what we are doing and how we're cooperating with HROBs and try to make it a little easier for them to do.
So the question I had is, do you know what kind of, I take it, it's, that they're talking to the post office. That's not something you're doing. I mean, have they had ongoing discussions with the post office? Do they feel like they're making any headway, or?
They have had ongoing discussions with the post office. Part of the issue is Harub's contracts with the company to print and mail the bills, and that occurs in Iowa, or it's out in the Midwest.
Okay.
So where in the postal office system it is hard to pinpoint.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you. Any other update? Part of your update? Okay, thank you. With that, if I could have a motion to adjourn until 5 p.m. on March 9th, 2021 for our regular meeting.
So moved.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Our meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Okay, ready? All right, call this meeting, James City County Board of Supervisors, regular meeting on February 9th, 2021, and just a little past 5 p.m. Roll call, Mr. Stevens, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Ms. Sadler?
Here.
Ms. Sadler represents the Stonehouse District and is vice chair of the board. Mr. Eisenhower?
Here.
Mr. Eisenhower represents the Jamestown District. Ms. Larson?
Here.
Ms. Larson represents the Berkeley District. Mr. McGlennon?
Here.
Mr. McGlennon represents the Roberts District. Mr. Hipple?
Here.
Mr. Hipple represents the Powhatan District and is chair to the board. Sitting to my far right is Adam Kinsman, county attorney, and I'm Scott Stevens, county administrator, and it's my pleasure to be clerk to the board.
Thank you, sir. All right, we'll go and have a moment of silence, and after that, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. And Mr. Polster, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight, sir? I will. Thank you, sir.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to
and the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, and indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, next is our public comment. Our first speaker, Peg Borman.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Hipple and members of the board, Mr. Stevens, Mr. Kinsman, and Mr. Purse. I'm Peg Borman. I live at 17 Settlers Lane in Lightfoot. And I come before you once again this afternoon to talk a little trash. And trash, I see it everywhere I go right now. And I'm thinking to myself, no one seems to have any pride for our county, and it just gives me so much sadness to see it laying out there. And I've read in the last word and on Facebook how people are talking about how bad it is and what something should be done, and you in the county ought to hire somebody to do something about it. And I'm just thinking to myself, why don't they do something about it? They don't, if they see it, pick it up, you know? But they want you to pay for it. Well, we can't afford to go out and pay for it all the time. Anyway, taxes would be really high, wouldn't they? Anyway, I wish I was still able to be out there and picking it up like I was at one time, because I would be out there with it. My Rutan group went out on the Martin Luther King Day, and they picked up on Centerville. And we got 9 bags. 1 big bag of just glass bottles. So, but if everybody would just pick up a little bit, even a quarter of a mile right in front of their own houses, it would be so much better. And just everybody would go out and do a little bit. My goodness, wouldn't it look pretty? Would look really nice, and just our roadways and our highways would be really clean, and that would be remarkable. But everybody can do something. They can be involved. April 17th, our spring cleanup is, annual spring cleanup will be that day. And if we all get busy and show how much we care about this beauty of our county, we can do it. And you can sign up on the Clean County website, or you can call me at 757-565-0032. Or you can email me at pborman, that's PBOARMAN, at cox.net. So if everybody would just get involved a little bit, we can make it really clean. So another note I want to make you aware of is the stewardship hour. We're doing it every other month now. The last one we had was in February, and that was on stormwater. The next one, January. February, we didn't do one. In March, we will be doing it the second Thursday at 5:30, and you can check on our website, the Clean County Commission website. And Emma, my co-chair, is doing a very good job with that program. And now I just want to put a little plug in here for Toanna. I've been out in the Toanna area a little bit the last 3 or 4 weeks, and people are just flying through there. I just think it's terrible. And the Historical Society, I know, has been trying to work on that problem, getting the speed limit lowered. And if we could just get it lowered from fire station to Toanna School every day instead of just when it's blinking, or if we could get a caution light that says pedestrian or watch out for pedestrians or something, it would be great. So we don't want to get somebody killed or badly injured there before we do something about it. And my Rutan Club is working on trying to get a grant for something that we could do there. I'm not sure, but I am working on it. So anyway, thank you for listening to me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, next speaker is Jay Everson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Jay Everson, 6923 Chancery Lane. I came back because it came to my attention that I wasn't very clear about the elementary school capacity numbers of last month. Those capacity numbers, which I had forwarded to you, were a direct result of a FOIA request. So those are the school board's own numbers of how many kids per grade and class in each of those schools. And all we did was take the Bright Beginnings, took an average of 22 kids per class, which is between K1 and 4, 5. That's the middle ground, about 22. Multiplied that by the number of classrooms to come up with the new and improved capacity numbers, which shows that the elementary school, for elementary school kids, is at 78.6%. It came to my attention that I wasn't clear on that point. Second thing was, which is totally unrelated to that, I know it's an election year. In election years on your budget, you can make adjustments in the pay of U5. I have spoken on this in the past, and it seems to me that an increase, if you could take it to the maximum, that'd be great, but any kind of an increase would be good, because I look at this and I view people who may be like Mr. Hipple, self-employed. He's fortunate he's got a couple of boys, at least, who helping who are helping out with the business, which frees him up. But there are a lot of folks who would probably do a good job on this board, but they can't afford to because their business takes a hit. And this would help, close the gap for them. And I've talked about this before, and I hope at some point in time this board will just go ahead and give yourself a raise. You deserve it. You spend a lot of time at this, and that's all I have to say. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment and consent calendar. We have nothing on the consent calendar, so we'll go into public hearings. And our PC rep, Frank Polster, how you doing, sir? And our first public hearing tonight will be Z-20-0005, Powhatan Trace Proffers Amendments. Ms. Costello, how you doing today?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Ms. Brandy Weiler of Housing Partnerships has submitted a request to amend the adopted proffers for Powhatan Terrace located at 1676 Jamestown Road. Powhatan Terrace was originally approved by the Board of Supervisors in 2008 as a cluster development consisting of 36 townhome units. At that time, all units were intended to be offered for sale. A proffer amendment was approved in 2017 to allow the rental of units, and another proffer amendment was approved in 2019 to allow for inclusion in the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, or LIHTC program. The applicant is currently proposing to amend the following proffers. Numbers 2, 8, and 15 to clarify property maintenance obligations and responsibility of the property owner while in a rental situation, in lieu of or prior to the creation of an owners association. These items relate to maintenance and funding of stormwater facilities, playgrounds, parking, and roads, as well as implementation of nutrient management plans. Number 4, to reflect the cash proffer reduction incentive as specified in the Housing Opportunities Policy, which allows for reduced expectations of cash proffers for units targeted at affordable and workforce housing. Specifically, units targeted to households meeting 30 to 60% AMI are eligible for a cash proffer reduction of 100% per unit. These reductions apply to contributions associated with impacts to schools, water and sewer, and other capital improvements. Staff notes that the cash proffer for off-site stream restoration remains, as this is not covered under the HOP incentive. Number 13, to change the green building standard from Earthcraft to the Energy Star program. Per the applicant, the currently proffered Earthcraft certification has become obsolete in Virginia, and so they are now proposing to achieve a green building standard through the Energy Star multifamily new construction program. Number 17, to clarify and enhance requirements for future soil monitoring and mitigation related to gas contamination resulting from underground storage tanks, which previously existed on site. And finally, number 19, to reflect that all units will be offered for rent at the 30 to 60% AMI range for a period of at least 30 years in compliance with the LIHTC program and as specified in HOP for cash proffer reduction eligibility. For proffers related to property maintenance or reserve funding for items like stormwater facilities, roads, and similar, staff finds the proposed amendments better clarify obligations and responsibilities of the property owner while under a rental situation, but still maintain the current requirements for a future owners association should that ever occur. For proffers related to HOP and cash contributions, staff finds that the proposed language better clarifies adherence to the HOP policy and confirms eligibility for cash proffer reductions. For the green building standard, staff finds that the Energy Star program is an acceptable alternative to the Earthcraft program and better clarifies triggers for submitting program specifications and final certification. For the proffer addressing the removal of the underground storage tanks, new language has been added to require compliance with conditions and recommendations specified by DEQ and a third-party environmental report. Staff finds that the new language provides more specificity and strengthens enforcement for future monitoring and mitigation of the site as it develops. With these conditions in mind, staff finds the proposal to be compatible with surrounding development and consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan. Staff recommends that the Board of Supervisors approve this application and accept the amended proffers. At this time, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is also here. Thank you.
Questions?
I just had one, if I could. I'm a little unclear about the question of the potential transition in the future to home ownership. I know we started off with these being offered for sale, but now they're all going to be rental units. And is the expectation that after the 30 years it may be something that would happen, or is there some sense that there would be a transition during that period in which the proffer maintains the price range.
I think I understand your question, I hope. I think the goal is for 30 years, it's going to be rental, and should it go to ownership, there's a protection in there to make sure that the HOA is created for all the maintenance of all the items out there with the roads and so
That's
forth.
exactly what I wanted to know. Thank you. That's great.
My question was, and it may be better suited to Mr. Stevens, where do we, because there's cost involved, where do those costs go? Like, since we're not getting, because of our policy, we're not going to be getting money for schools, et cetera, but that's obviously a negative on our side. Where do we put that, and how do we account for that?
Ms. Larson, I'd want to verify, but as we collect those monies, I would assume we're setting them aside, so when you have that capital expenditure, that we have the funds that have been submitted into that account. So if you don't collect all of that, whatever the school cost ends up being when it comes time to build a school, if you need $20 million and you've got 15 set aside, then we'll have to make up the difference through a borrowing or some other type of instrument finance, whether it's pay with cash or borrowing to fund that difference.
I didn't know, I mean, and maybe this is too simplistic, but I didn't know if there was a, how we acknowledge, because we are taking, but do we need to acknowledge that anywhere? That's just something maybe for a longer conversation, or a longer outlook, but I'm just curious as to how we
Well, I'll verify
Note
the
that.
accounting of that, of where money
Okay.
goes and how we account for that, so we know what we've collected, and I'm sure we can bring that back to you and tell you where that's been and what the amounts would be.
Okay, thank you. And I did receive a call from Brandy just to let me know that it was on the agenda, and we didn't get into specifics, but I do want to acknowledge that. And you feel comfortable with the DEQ where we are with the soil contamination, that there's a good plan in place, and
Yes, there are conditions built in, and according to the report that came from the environmental specialists, should they excavate to a certain level, there'll be, more testing and there'll be remediation. So that even though the case is closed with DEQ, it can be reopened should anything be found out there during the building process.
thank you.
Would you mind repeating the school numbers for the cash proffer amount, if you would, please? And what it was and what it would be if this were approved?
Are we talking about the AMI, the 30 to 60%?
No, just the amount for schools, the cash proffer amount. Sorry.
I don't know offhand what that school
I
proffered.
think I read it, but I don't have it.
1,870.
And that would totally go away then? Is that what
Yes.
we're saying?
If they were within that AMI range, yes.
If I could just comment for a second about this, when the cash proffer policy was adopted, probably now about 15 years ago, I guess, the question was raised about how those cash proffers would allow us to meet a need for affordable housing. And so at that time, the board adopted a policy that said, because affordable housing was a high priority for the county, that we would not expect that housing that met that very low income threshold to be responsible for the cash proffers for schools, that instead that would be a cost that the county would pay because of the need to provide affordable housing.
How many children do you guesstimate would be in this complex?
I don't have that number readily available.
Mr. Stevens, would you happen to know? I'm sorry.
Sally, there are 36 units there. I don't know that I would know what that calculate to. We could get that for you so you'd have an idea of that, but with 36 units, that would be that many families. So I would expect you to have some school children, but I don't know that number to share with you this evening.
Other question, Jim?
I was, to follow on the proffers, I found the information there, but it says 4,870 for a unit for schools, think it said $1,000 for county capital programs and $844 for JCSA. So it was $6,714 per unit, 36 units, about a little under $242,000 is basically the price tag on that. So that was one of the questions I had, but I hadn't found where all the details were. Question I have for you. I remember when this came before the board. I had been on the board a very short time period. If I remember correctly, I don't think I voted for it. But it is one of those cases where when you're dealing with a land use case, the decision you make goes on with that land forever, in perpetuity. So it's really important to get the details correct. This is one of those cases where we looked at it, we said yes, and it's been back to us many, many times since then because the people who were going to do it didn't do it. It gets sold, it gets moved around. Things that you think may happen when you are approving the thing probably aren't what's going to happen. So my question has to do with where we are right now. If this piece of property somehow wound up being sold again to somebody else, and where we are now before this proffer gets amended, what if a company came in and bought it and came back to us next week, what can they do with this right now? Are they can build 36 units? Do they under the current rules, do they all have to be rental? Or can they still be some for sale?
They would be subject to the 2019 ones,
Okay.
proffers. They just talk about a minimum of 8 of the units shall be reserved and offer for rent.
Okay. So basically, if that happened, somebody could come in and build and sell 28 homes and have 8 of them would have to be set up as rentals.
Right.
So,
Right.
okay. And if we do this proffer amendment, then what happens is whoever winds up, whether it's this applicant or some future applicant or whatever, whoever winds up doing it is now going to be committed to providing 36 at rental for a period of 30 years.
Correct.
So that would essentially limit what could be done with it to a greater degree than what could be done with it right now.
And all of those units would also be covered by that 30 to 60% AMI
Yes.
condition, right?
Yes.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
it would. Okay, I wanted to, we've had so many different incremental changes as we've gone through here. And what I wanted to do is to make absolutely sure we knew that what could happen with this piece of property.
Right, correct.
Ultimately, know that the applicant would like to have certain things happen and that we hope that it happens the way they'd like to, but it doesn't necessarily always happen that way. And we have to be in a mindset where we're looking at what ultimately could happen to this piece of property and how it would affect the citizens of our county, because that's whose interest we're looking out for. So, okay, I think that answers my basic question that I wanted to sure where we were on what could be done.
And but in a lot of ways, this set of proffer amendments, at least in significant part, is to bring the development into line with the tax credit program. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we know that this was successful in competing for that tax credit program. We know that we want to accomplish the goal of providing 36 units to address the housing needs of low and moderate income citizens. And so if for any reason this didn't go forward, then somebody else would have to come in with another proposal that would cause us to reevaluate the conditions, right? We would have another bite at the apple.
We have another bite at the apple if we wanted to change it. I was just concerned about what would happen, what could be done without having to come back to us. So,
But as Jim was saying, that would mean 242,000 by changing this loss in revenue.
one-time revenue.
And, you know, and I'm not against the project at all. But, you know, I'm looking at how much loss, you know, is there a compromise in loss? You know, because we're, you know, it's gonna tax the citizens as well, the neighborhood, and then this loss in the schools, and you know, the loss isn't just this, but it carries on, and there's a certain portion we carry, you know, to help support that. But how much is that portion? Is that portion the 242,000 that we're looking at tonight with the other added losses that we'll have? Or is there a compromise between that? Because we may set a precedent on the next group that comes in that says, I want to do this, but I want this off, this off, this off. And as we do that, I know we do a certain portion to help someone out. But what does that do to the citizens that have other projects going on and they're promoting and trying to bring forward and have nothing on their side and everything on the other side? So is there a compromise between all or nothing?
The only thing I'd say about that is that, you know, this is part of an adopted policy that also involves a sliding scale. So that depending on what the incomes or the values of the residences are, the degree of forgiveness of school proffers changes. So that if you're at the 80% AMI level, then that proffer is not reduced entirely.
Right.
So what we're basically talking about is something that's already specified in policy as how we address the need for low-income housing, recognizing that housing that's being provided for people at the 30 to 60% of average median income, you're not going to be able to provide much housing for folks if they are going to have to pay the full cost of those school proffers.
Yeah, and that's where I'm thinking that,
Right.
you know, I know we don't talk about apartments and that sort of thing, but, you know, it's cheaper to build up and together than it is separate. So that's always something that, you know, we can get bigger bang for our buck by building that way than we can individually in units. Even if we put 2 or 3 together, we put 20 or 30 together, it's cheaper to build. So if we're going to go down that road, we need to start looking I feel, in that direction. And yes, apartments aren't exactly the thing everybody wants, but it'll give you a chance to get going and get started. Even with the sliding scale, you know, that's a significant change in what we thought when we approved it last time, 242, if that's the exact amount, somewhere close to that, 242,000 loss from where we thought last time we approved this to where we are now. And it's not from this board, it's from a delay of construction for some reason. I don't know what it is, and there's a lot of, you know, parcels that play in that. But I'm just, you know, I'm always thinking about that dollar because, you know, it takes those dollars to do these projects. And when we don't have those dollars, we can't do the project. So, you know, it's like a dog chasing its tail. We got to, you know, catch it sometime here and there.
Well, and to your point, that's what we do with the schools constantly. It's a dog chasing its tail, trying to make sure we have adequate space and funding off the backs of all the taxpayers. So that's my biggest concern is the impact it's going to have on schools and the financing of schools.
I think maybe what will tailor into some of this with the school system and during our meetings with the school system would be, you know, how much because the last time I heard it, we had our reduced lunches and all were really high. Seemed like for our area, as rich as our area seems to be, and which I'm all for, but, you know, it seemed to be very high. And so by adding different neighborhoods as we go along, not picking on this neighborhood, but adding different neighborhoods as we go along, what stress levels that put on our schools that we maybe not be looking at? because they're gonna come back and say, we need more money. We need more money for this, and we need more money for that. So we've gotta look at that other side of the fence too, as far as what does that put on our school systems, as far as filling that, void, because we're gonna be the ones filling it.
If I remember correctly, when we adopted the Proffer policy, I think that the Proffer policy for schools aimed at trying to help offset the cost of new construction. It was not aimed at the cost of trying to offset operations.
Right.
Okay? And I would ask the question, maybe, and I don't know if this is, staff may or may not have the immediate answer, just not even an exact answer, but a ballpark. How much money have we collected in school proffers? Because I think we've had that discussion at one time in the board before, and it was not as significant amount of money as you might think. That since we've instituted the proffer policy, we really have not collected that much in the way of school proffer money. Is that? Do you have any idea, Jason, or I don't know. Right.
I think you're right, Mr. Eisenhower, because I think we adopted the policy after several years of trying to get consideration of school proffer policy right before the real estate crash, and so we didn't get a lot of collection.
So, and I think ultimately when it comes back down to it, the only way you benefit from proffers is by allowing a whole lot more new development, because that's all you can put the proffers on is new development. Whereas I think that we would be much better off if we had the opportunity, and come back again to my favorite argument of impact fees, where it's spread across all the people utilizing the facilities. So I don't want to get too hung up on proffers, and it's a philosophical argument, but the question becomes, in my mind, how much are we collecting? How big a deal is it in the long term of what I think compared to what we've actually spent on building new schools, it's a drop in the bucket. So it really is fairly small. But philosophically, I think I understand the argument. But I come back to the idea that we built the policy to try to be on a sliding scale to try to help incentivize something we felt was important for the community in the way of affordable housing. So,
yeah, and I'm once again I'm for helping and helping with projects and that sort of thing. But just looking at the figure and wonder if there was a compromise between one number and another, and that's all I'm thinking about, because is bringing another thing up to the county and saying, hey, I want to do this and I want this, and I know sliding scale and depending on where, but they may want, and then is this the only thing we're going to want in this project? Will there be anything else before the project? We had a few wants at the last time. We've got a few more wants this time. If we go another 4, 5, 3 years or whatever, is there more wants next time? And it's the same thing we talk about with developers, death by 1,000 cuts, and one way or the other. I think it's a good project. I think it's a fine. I'm not against the project. I'm just thinking of, payments down the road.
So I think that we do have to, we know we have an affordable housing need here in the county. Maybe we have to have a further discussion about, and that's why I asked the question about where is somewhere we have to have our checks and balances on if we're going to do it, which we have a policy, that states where's that going to come from? Because eventually, the well's only so deep.
Exactly.
So is this going to be, okay, we need this gets approved, and what about the next one? Like we've taken this much out of the well for this project. What does that mean for the next one coming up? We won't have. Where are we going to get the resources if they meet this threshold as well? So I think that's a discussion that we're going to have to continue to have. Where are we going to get the resources in order to back up the policy, in order to back up what we say that we want, which is more affordable housing? So,
And so I think we also have to understand why we're looking at this tonight. And the reason we're looking at it tonight is because the developers in this instance have successfully competed for low-income tax credits that allow the project to go forward, but not as it was originally envisioned as for sale units. It has to be rental units, and they have to meet that very hard-to-meet price point. And so we're really doing it from that perspective. I guess I need to refresh my memory about our housing opportunity policy. I thought it applied to for sale homes as opposed to multifamily rental, but maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know if anybody recalls that aspect.
Both.
Both, okay. And at the same rate?
Welcome, Mr.
The
Holt.
profit reduction, it's the same, it's the equivalent of the monthly rent versus what the affordable mortgage would be. Or for sale,
Okay. Mhm.
for the price point.
So in other words, the question of what the rental can be is determined by the policy.
Correct. It would be the same affordability range, the rent that would be affordable to those making 60% of area median income. And in your HOP policy, that's affirmed by an annual reporting requirement for those annual rents to make sure that number was not exceeded.
And I think Ruth has got a very good point, is that ultimately, we're gonna have to come back, if it's important to us to have affordable or workforce housing in the county, we're gonna have to come back and take a look at it from a new perspective, because first of all, we have learned that for purchase doesn't work. It works one time, unless you get into this soft second, which county staff is not really wild about. The house will then go back on the market when it gets sold. The best way that we have, I think, to help folks who need the affordable housing has to be a public-private partnership. The county has to be a participant in the problem, in the process. We have to do it with our either nonprofits or whatever in the community. And you're right, it probably is going to be focused more on apartments or the buildings that are less expensive to build. We can help by trying to find pieces of property that we can then put forward into the process as part of our effort. But that's a program that we really haven't gotten wrapped our arms around yet. I think we need to ultimately, because what we've done in the past has been helpful, but it's not really addressed the situation to the degree to which I think our task force showed us we need to engage. This is one of those unusual circumstances in that it was not something that was started from the ground up as a program like this. This is one that was a commercial process. It was going to be just houses, market rate housing for sale. And it has transformed itself over time, and that's why it's a little unusual in what we're dealing with. I think if we were dealing with something from the ground up with a public-private partnership, we would be very straightforward about trying to make it as affordable as possible, which might include some breaks on some of the proffers and things we would normally have for otherwise ongoing commercial operations. So, I think that ultimately we need to look at it, but for this particular issue, this is a unique set of circumstances that we need to address, and we need to take a look at it and see if what they're requesting here is reasonable and helps us achieve at least some of what we have not been able to achieve otherwise.
And I think following that line of thought, I think one of the things we need to look at too is how much, not cost, but how much compared to the rest of the community we need to be affordable. Because we could build affordable across the entire acres of James City County, and people would move into them if they were affordable, because it's not in other communities, and especially wanting to be in James City County, which I don't blame them, wanting to move in James City County. So what is our, because we see in transportation a lot of our people travel to different areas to work and come back. And affordable housing should be the same thing, but what is the balance? I think would be our starting point is, where is the balance between enough, not enough, or too much? And I think we could start with that and then build upon that and figure out where we need to go. So any other questions or anything from staff?
Mr. Hippel, if I could just answer Ms. Sadler's question, as you were debating or discussing, Mr. Purse provided a 2007 staff report that showed 6 students were expected from this development. And then Mr. Holt ran it through the worksheet while he was in back, and the 2009 numbers or the calculation yielded 6 as well. So 6 is the number, I believe, in terms of school-age children you would expect from the development.
Mr. Chairman, if I could answer Mr. Eisenhower's question, in FY 1920, the county collected $894,000 in total cash proffers, expended about that amount, and $412,000 of that was for schools.
Thank you. Did I answer everybody's questions?
Yes.
Thank you. Cool. All right. Let's go ahead then, and I'll go ahead and have my PC report. Mr. Bolster, how you doing, sir? Thank you. Yes, sir.
Congratulations on your new position, and
Thank
good
you,
evening,
sir.
board members. The Powhatan Terrace Proffer Amendment. Excuse me. The most salient aspect of this application is that all 36 units will be offered for rent at the 30 to 60% annual mean income range for a period of at least 30 years in compliance with the low-income housing tax credit program. In addition, because all of the rental units are at that 30 to 60% AMI, under the housing opportunity policy, there's that 100% piece that we were just talking about. And that reduction applied to contributions, as you've discussed, associated with impacts on schools, water, sewer, and public infrastructure. The contribution, as you had computed, ended up at $6,714 per unit. For the 36 was a total of $242, which you all figured out. The 100% cash proffer reduction is an implicit indication of the monetary value that the board's housing opportunity policy placed on the need for affordable housing. The 30 to 60% average mean income is the lowest level and described as a section of our county population most in need of affordable and workforce housing at a rental price point that does not exceed that 30% AMI. And one of the benchmarks that I've used is a starting salary for a policeman, a fireman, or an EMS, which is at $40,000. And when you think about the same price for a school teacher, they have to get a roommate. They can't afford that because you can't find a place at a rental rate less than $1,200, $1,400 a month. And so this is really an implicit expression on the board to do that. Now, I'm going to mention this editorial comment in that we just finished last night going through the second chapter of the housing chapter of the comp plan. And one of the things that we struggled with was taking the housing task force recommendations and implementing them into strategies and actions. And without a housing opportunity process, which you rescinded, there is no way to incentivize these type of housing projects unless you can get somebody to get into a low-income tax. Or one of the suggestions out of the task force was a combination of using county land with a private partnership type thing. But those things were coming back. And so it is for that set of reasons that this application was such a salient thing and made such an impression on the planning commissioners. The planning commission recommended approval of this application and acceptance of the amended proffers by a vote of 7-0. I'd be more than happy to take any questions.
Questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Very good. All right, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. And Jenny Wertman, excuse me. Welcome and thank you for your good work.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Good
ma'am.
evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Jenny Wertman. I am a board member of Housing Partnerships, so I'm here on behalf of them tonight. I live at 112 Southern Hills in Williamsburg, and I have a slide presentation. Thank you very much. And with me tonight are Brandy Weiler, our executive director, and 2 other board members, Steve Romeo and Andy Frank, who will be able to answer all kinds of questions if they come up. As you know, Housing Partnerships has been around since 1985. We've been doing repair work and replacement of completely dilapidated houses. We're also a regional administrator of the IPR program. And hopefully the developer of Powhatan Terrace. Okay, I have to figure out how to do this next. Okay. We're here tonight to ask you two things. One is to approve this proffer amendment. And the next, I'm sorry to say, Mr. Chairman, is I'm already asking again.
Not a problem.
But better now than in a few
It
months,
is.
right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We also would like to talk to you in a few minutes about granting relief from some JCSA fees. Again, all in support of encouraging and aiding the development of affordable housing, and especially by nonprofit organizations like ours. Okay. Oops. I'm not going to go through, you've pretty much heard all the history on, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay. Pretty much heard all the history on the proffers. It started out as a commercial market rate, commercially developed market rate with everything for sale. Now it will be, we hope, a single owner owned by housing partnerships. We intend to use, we got into this because we thought that having this project would not only benefit the community, but it would also provide a stable source of income for housing partnerships over the years. We are, as you know, we received approval in 2019 of the low-income housing tax credits, and we will, as a result, be committed to 30 years of ownership with the 30 to 60% AMI, and if we assume it will just keep going that way as far as we're concerned. The proffers, I have to say, have an escalation clause in them, so it's actually a little more than $242,000. And I know that because we're in the middle of trying to put together our financing stack. We figure it's roughly 250 at this point. And so we're asking you to approve those. We also want to talk to you about tap fees. When we first put together our budget, this is a $9.2 million project, roughly. When we first put together our budget, the tap fees were estimated at $275,000. That was under the prior rate structure. It was reduced then because when we transferred from for sale units to rental units, we went to a master meter, which then reduced the number of connections, so the tap fees declined to $100,000. Under the new rate structure, the sewer and water facility fee is now estimated at $580,000, which is a huge hit to our budget. It's more than 6% of our total development budget, 5 times more than we were expecting. And we are in the midst of trying to put together our financing stack with the hope that we would go to closing in the June-July timeframe. And we understand JCSA needs to have a firm financial footing, but fees like this are just a huge barrier for the development of affordable housing, and especially by nonprofits like HPI that rely on federal and state money, the housing trust funds, federal and state housing trust funds. We have spoken with Mr. Powell about this and really, really appreciate so much the time that he has taken to listen to our concerns and devise some alternatives, which he has perhaps spoken with you already for your consideration. We respectfully, very respectfully ask that you weigh those alternatives and hopefully are able to come up with a solution that would not be just for housing partnerships, but again would recognize the commitment to affordable housing that the county wants to make. I was also a member of the Workforce Housing Task Force, and we debated all kinds of solutions to this problem, which just seems to go on and on and on without having good solutions. So we're asking for basically a break in these JCSA fees, whether you can come up with something that's like a HOP policy for the sewer and water connections. The reason the fees are so large is because we have to have an 8-inch main going in. We certainly don't expect any kind of decision on this tonight or right away. We hope if you would be able to give us some indication in the next month or so, that would be lovely, because then we could be on a much firmer footing with regard to our financing request. And we thank you very, very much for your consideration. I don't want to take a whole lot more time because you've had so much conversation already, but we're certainly available to answer any questions if you have them.
Questions before she steps down? Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Let's see if I have any. Making sure I don't have any other speakers. And I don't think I do on that. Okay, that's all the speakers, so we'll go ahead and close that public hearing and look for the board for direction, decision, discussion. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, since there was JCSA brought into this discussion, I just want to confirm, we are not acting on anything?
No.
To do, okay. And I would just ask maybe if Mr. Powell could look at some short-term and long-term impacts for what some of this would mean for JCSA in the future, that you.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to confuse the two entities.
That's all right. No.
Yes.
Powell, what type of time would you need in order to come, would you be able to come back to us in March with some information and?
Well, if I could provide some sort of background comments and give some context first. Under the legal framework in which the service authority operates, we have to treat all developments equally. So we cannot, just because a development might meet a definition of affordable, there's nothing we can do to assist that particular development or applicant any more than we can do for anyone else. We have to treat everybody the same. And in the 2020 rate study, we did, as the applicant noted, we did change the facility fee structure, and we changed it pretty significantly. Those fees had not been updated in quite some time, and the consultant, in reviewing what we were doing, basically concluded that we needed to recalibrate the facility fees. We actually reduced facility fees for single-family residential, but we increased fees for multifamily and commercial to more accurately reflect the burden that those developments place on the system. So that's sort of the background of how we got to where we are. And also to the applicant's point, the main reason an 8-inch meter is needed is because of the fire protection that's required for this type of development. So that's what's driving the cost. To answer your question more directly, I think if we were going to look at this, if the board wanted us to sort of reevaluate our facility fee structure, we would have to, I think, work with our rate study consultant to do that. I think we're probably talking at least 2 months. I don't think that's something we could turn around in a month, but we could probably do it fairly quickly.
So are you saying that you'd have to do a wholesale look at changing all of the, I'm sorry, Ms. Sadler, did I
Well,
jump?
No, I just wanted. no, go ahead.
I don't necessarily know, but it is possible. Because as part of the 2020 rate study, we lowered the fees for single-family residential. So now if we turn around and also lower the fees for a type of development where we had increased the fees, it's really, it's
I don't
it's
think
creating an
well,
issue.
I don't know. I don't want to speak for everybody. I don't think that's what we're interested in doing, is going back, are we? And looking at all those, but well, we're not officially in a JCSA meeting, so I don't know
Right.
that we
So-
can really make that
so-
decision.
That's
I mean,
why
but
it's getting
it-
confusing, because there was
it-
two different things going on.
But it is, I mean, to clarify, it is legally possible. I mean, if you said we just want to look at the multifamily structure, I mean, that is something we can do. I'm just saying that it does have an impact on.
Bigger impact.
A bigger, right.
Ms. Larson, the JCSA lacks the ability to say that, so what Mr. Powell is saying is you can reduce your rates for multifamily structures, but you can't reduce some multifamily structures and not others. It's an entire class. And so if there's to be a solution specific to housing partnerships, it's not through the JCSA, it's through
Okay.
the Board of Supervisors.
Okay,
And if the board wanted to do that, the most obvious solution that I can think of would be that the board would then have the county donate money to housing partnerships to then take it and pay it to the JCSA. I can't really come up with another legal avenue to just address one particular type of housing development when it comes to water and sewer rates.
But then we would have to do that for all of them, since they all have to be treated equally?
Well, you wouldn't have to, but you'd be certainly setting a precedent for that, and that's something I would advise the board, that we come up with a policy similar to the housing opportunities policy as to how to deal with water and sewer rates from the county perspective, not the JCSA. Mr. Powell's hands are sort of tied on that respect.
I don't think then we want you to go back and, yeah, okay.
I would say that this, as Mr. Kinsman said, this is actually more of an issue that if we want to address it, would have to be done by the Board of Supervisors, and it would have to be done under the same kind of approach that we talked about of our housing opportunity policy, where we said here's a benefit that we would be willing to forego some revenue for, and that's, to me, the only way we could get around that one would be some sort of a policy like that. But as he mentions, once you set a policy like that, you have to be consistent in how you apply that to everybody who comes down the pike. And so then you have to make sure that when you do it, you are setting a policy that achieves something very specific that you want, and it's not just opening the door for everybody.
That's affordable to the rest of the county as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So we're back to the issue at hand, which is the amendments of these proffers.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Roll call, please.
Ms. Larson,
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower,
Aye.
Ms. Sadler, Sadler?
I'm really struggling with this. I really like the project. I'm really hung up on all the unanswered questions about schools. For that reason only, I'm a no.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, we'll move into our next public hearing, SUP-20-0018, 8251 Richmond Road, Hertzler and George Landscape. Tom, welcome, sir. Got to get that off. You got 3 tonight, huh?
Only 3. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members
Thank
of
you,
the board. Mr. Ryan Stevenson of AES has applied on behalf of Mr. Hertzler for a special use permit for a contractor's office and associated storage yard at a property located at 8251 Richmond Road. The property is zoned A1 General Agriculture, designated General Industry on the comprehensive plan, and is located inside the primary service area. The proposed contractor's office and storage yard would utilize 4.97 acres of the 29.72 acre parcel. The proposal would convert the existing structures on site as office space and add parking. Behind the existing structures, the proposal includes a gravel laydown yard, a storage yard, stockpile and storage area, as well as a maintenance building. Previously, this property was for Life Point Christian Church as office space. Conditions have been included to reduce impacts to the adjacent residential properties. These conditions include limitations on the light pole heights, widened landscape buffers, and increased evergreen requirements to screen the facility. At its January 6, 2021 regular meeting, the Planning Commission recommended approval of this application to the Board of Supervisors by a vote of 7-0. Staff finds the proposal to be compatible with surrounding development, consistent with the comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance. Staff recommends that the Board of Supervisors approve of this application, subject to the proposed conditions. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicants are here as well. Thank you.
Could you just talk a little bit about the change in the environmental plan?
Yeah, so I can let the applicants be more in depth on the actual work that would need to be done. But the change was the original condition that was sent to you guys stated that the landscape buffer behind the residential properties next to the residential property must be undisturbed. Due to the topography of the property, some tie-in grading would need to be done within that buffer to allow the water to drain properly onto their site. And again, I can let AES get more technical with it, but so we revised the condition and worked with AES and the potential property owner to allow staff to get a better look at that prior to land disturbance and site plan approval. So that would include an on-site visit with the landscape planner and anyone else that the plan director feels should go out there as well. The planner, the engineer would be out there as well. And they would have to submit a grading plan and also a tree preservation plan so that we know which trees are being picked and moved or what's being removed in those buffer areas. And then they would have to replant it based on condition 3C, I think it is.
So stormwater is a problem everywhere in the world, apparently. Certainly in James City County, it's a problem everywhere you look. And if I'm understanding what's happening in this instance, basically what we're saying is that if we had stuck with the original condition, it could actually create a nuisance for the neighbors or some problems for them in terms of drainage, and that in order to address that, you have to disturb the land in between?
So if we would have left it as is, the condition would have prevented them from doing any clearing within that buffer. One solution they would have is to move anything along those two buffers away so they can do the tie-in grading. I wouldn't be able to answer whether it would cause drainage issues on the adjacent property as is.
Any other questions? No? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Polster, welcome again.
The commissioners found this consistent with the comp plan's designation of a general industry. We did hear from Ms. Dorothy Prout, the adjacent property owner at 8277 Richmond Road. And when you looked at that master plan, actually, this thing is only taking about a third of that entire thing. And so she was to the right there. And she was really kind of concerned about her well septic system as well as additional noise. She was concerned about the privacy and additional traffic. Staff had looked at the distances from neighboring properties and added additional buffering conditions on just the residential side. Staff additionally added a condition for an operation mitigation plan. Staff stated that with this condition at the site plan stage, the applicant has been asked to explain how they're going to mitigate all of this, to include the grading issues that we're talking about that are relevant on the back side there. And of course, this mitigation plan is going to include the dust, noise, hours of operation, roadway impact, and lighting in the storage yard, which is behind there for it. So the staff intended to follow up, and I know they did with Mrs. Prowett to make sure that she knew what was actually going to happen and then be consulted on it. The Planning Commission's voted 7-0 to recommend approval of the SUP request to the Board of Supervisors. Happy to take any questions.
Questions?
You said staff was going to follow up with the citizen who had concerns?
Yes, and they did talk to her right after the session, as well as Mr. Hertzler did too. They reach out, and that was one of the concerns, was that she's brand new to the area, and she's right next to it.
Thank you.
Can maybe staff address the question of what her response was?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
No,
you.
I'm talking to Mr. West.
Tom? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, as Mr. Polster stated, I did talk to the citizen out there in the lobby along with Mr. Hertzler. I provided her my contact information. I did not get a phone call or email from her, but I did ask her if she had any concerns, and she was just unfamiliar with what was happening at the time, so
No news is okay then?
I guess.
Thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. And the applicant, Mr. Hertzler. How you doing, sir? Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I just want to take a second to say thank you for all the incredibly hard work you guys put into keeping the county running. I know it's a never-ending task, and you guys do a great job, so thank you. I guess I'll just tell a little bit about what brings me to here tonight and to this property. I've run my company for about 30 years, Hertzler and George. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, we do full-service landscape design, construction, maintenance, service the city of Williamsburg, all throughout James City County and Upper York County. The business has been located within the city of Williamsburg for pretty much almost the whole time. I would actually love to keep the business in the city of Williamsburg. I love living in the city. I've loved my business in the city. I love my 6-minute commute from my home to my business. I'm going to miss that. But simple fact is we've run out of space. We had a similar, about a year ago, Bycast came before you, and they ended up, they were our neighbor where we're at now, and if we do ultimately move here, they'll be our next door neighbor again, so which is kind of neat. But we've just simply run out of space in the location we're at. So about a year ago, we started looking around, trying to find a location that was suitable, that would allow the kind of use that we have, contractor's yard. Just didn't exist within the city, certainly not at a price where I could afford the amount of land that we needed. So, that moved us out to the county, and trust me, we looked all over the place, and ultimately came to this property, and I think this will do just fine. I really do. The location is pretty decent for us. It allows us for our crews to access the neighborhoods and the businesses that we serve very well. The site is challenging, and we can talk about that a little bit. As we've started to hammer into some of the site plan details, we're starting to appreciate those challenges. But overall, the site will work for us. Do we need this much land? No, not anywhere close. We currently function on a fraction of that much land, and so will we ultimately do something with the rest of the property? Sure, I intend to. I'd rather the property be zoned industrial rather than SUP, but in order to do the acquisition, we needed to kind of go this route. So probably at some point I'll be circling back around once we get our feet under us, figure out what we're doing with the property, circle back around and come before you, probably to ask for a zoning change to industrial. But for right now, special use permit allows me to get the business there, get it operational, get our feet under us, and you know, do the gargantuan task of moving a business from one location to another, which, trust me, I'm not looking forward to, especially with it happening in the spring at the very hard, the busiest time of year for us. So that's what brings me to this property. Again, it's a challenging site. There's a tremendous amount of slope from the Richmond Road as it moves back towards the railroad tracks. There's a tremendous amount of slope to the property. The ideal site for us would have been a flat, level, cleared piece of land, and this is not that. It's anything but that. It's got slope, it's got RPA, it's completely wooded other than the very front of it. And so we've got a lot of work to get this thing to happen. As we started the process, that, again, talking about these buffers and this whole change that you brought up about, you know, this grade tie-in, there's this nasty little word in there that I didn't quite get called shall remain undisturbed. The buffers shall remain undisturbed. You know, I'm no lawyer. I'm no, you know, I'm just an ignorant landscaper in the end. And I didn't understand the implications of that word. And so I circled back around. We looked at it, and for those buffers to remain undisturbed, we would have to shift everything farther away in order to achieve the grade tie-in. And so in the back, you know, not only we're at 75 feet of buffer, then we would have to move to about 95 feet in order to achieve grade tie-in. On the side, we would have to go from about 35 feet to about 55 feet to achieve grade tie-in. And I would really like to not do that. So we started to work with staff to try to say, you know, what could we do about that? I had the engineers really look at the grading plan, and quite frankly, the amount that we need to get into those buffers is tiny. And I'm willing to do what it takes to preserve the trees on the site. I started my business as a consultant working with developers in James City County to preserve trees on development sites. That's how I started the business. I know something about it. I'm a true believer. You know, I want to preserve every mature tree on this site that we possibly can, and certainly within the buffers. So I think with staff, you know, we looked at the small incursion that we would need to do into these buffers in order to achieve the grade tie-in that we want. You know, we're willing to do retaining walls. You know, we'll figure out with their help on site, instead of just talking about it in theory, we'll figure it out on site with them and come up with solutions that do in fact achieve the preservation of mature trees and still allow us to get the grade tie-in that we want. You know, why is that important? Again, this is a sloping site. The properties at the front, that front Richmond Road, all drain across this property. And my hope is that we can capture the water coming from those properties and divert it to where we want before it moves into the, you know, what I call the work area, the area of our lay down yard and all that. So if we can capture it, do what we need to do with it before we get into those areas, I would really like to do that. So again, I'd be happy to answer any questions you've got about the proposal as it stands, this specific question, if you've got that or anything else. I'd be more than happy to answer whatever I can for you.
Questions? None? Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. No others for that, so I'll go ahead and close that public hearing and look for the board for discussion, decisions, and questions.
Move the
I move
motion.
to approve.
Okay.
I'll fight you.
And before we vote on that, I would like to say that Joe's team has worked for me on different sites that I've done and the work he's done out on site and everything else is just immaculate. His team does a wonderful job, and I can't think of anything that he wouldn't do on a job site for anyone that he wouldn't do in his place of business as well. So I think he's going to be welcome to James City County. I think he's going to be an asset to us in James City County, and I don't get the whole vote, but I get a little here. All right, so may I have a motion? Do we
got
have
a
a
couple.
motion?
Yes,
Yes.
we have two.
Two motions.
Dueling motions.
Well, we've got two motions. Roll call, please, sir.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan? Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, that moves right along. All right, next it puts us into Z-19-0013/MP-19-0011 Colonial Heritage Deer Lake Rezoning and Master Plan Amendment. Tom, I think you're up another one. You're getting them all today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Mr. Greg Davis of Kaufman and Knowles has submitted an application on behalf of Leonard to rezone approximately 220 acres from A1 with proffers and rural cluster SUP to mixed use with proffers. The rezoning request proposes 150 single-family age-restricted units, which would become part of the Colonial Heritage HOA. The area is currently located in the PSA and is designated low-density residential and on the comprehensive plan. The 220 acres proposed to be rezoned is currently known as the Deer Lake Estates and is approved as a specially permitted rural cluster consisting of 50 single-family lots. As currently approved, Deer Lake Estates is associated with Colonial Heritage, but would function as its own distinct neighborhood with its own HOA and dedicated access point from Jolly Pond Road. In its current form, Deer Lake Estates is not age-restricted and has no internal connections to Colonial Heritage proper. Of the 220 acres proposed to be rezoned, approximately 100 acres on the northern side of the property would be placed under a conservation easement. The proposal also included is an 8-acre parcel to be dedicated to the Colonial Heritage HOA for recreational purposes. Access to the 150 units would be through the internal private street road system, as well as the gated entrance from Jolly Pond Road for residents, which was added by the applicants since the Planning Commission meeting. Associated amendments to the existing Colonial Heritage Master Plan are proposed as part of this rezoning. The amendments will incorporate the Deer Lake Estates property into the Colonial Heritage Master Plan as a new land bay. Additionally, the amendments will bring the master plan into conformance with the current ordinance requirements, which did not exist at the time of the previous approval in 2004. The overall caps of 2,000 residential units and 425 square feet of commercial building area remain the same. The applicant has proposed to amend and restate the existing 2004 proffers such that they will apply to both the existing Colonial Heritage as well as the proposed Deer Lake Estates property. The applicant has provided proffered new conditions to assure additional traffic improvements along Richmond Road to mitigate impacts identified in the updated traffic study related to the commercial development. Conveyance of 8-acre parcel to HOA for additional amenities. Conveyance of the 100-acre conservation easement to the county. The overall maximum residential cap of 2,000 units, and assurances for construction phasing plan as required in the mixed-use district ordinance. Staff also notes that because the original traffic study is over 5 years old, current policies required an updated traffic study as part of this application, which was submitted and reviewed by VDOT and a third-party traffic consultant. It was found that the residential units proposed for Deer Lake would not produce impacts that required additional mitigation on public right-of-ways. However, additional traffic improvements were recommended at the intersection entering the commercial land bay, which is Land Bay 6 from Richmond Road. This intersection is currently signalized and it also serves as an entrance into Williamsburg Pottery. The applicant has proposed proffers for traffic improvements at this intersection, which were reviewed by the traffic consultant and found them to adequately address all items. Since the Planning Commission meeting, a new proffer has been added to mitigate potential impacts related to the newly proposed Jolly Pond entrance. Because the overall 2,000 unit cap will not change and the 2004 proffers will continue to apply, staff finds that the proposed rezoning for 150 residential age-restricted units will not generate additional public impacts requiring mitigation and is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Traffic impacts related to the commercial land bay per the updated traffic study, as well as new Jolly Pond Road entrance, have been adequately mitigated through the proposed proffers. Staff also finds that the amendment to the master plan result in more conforming development overall. At its January 6, 2021 regular meeting, the Planning Commission recommended approval of this application to the Board of Supervisors by a vote of 6-1. With these considerations in mind, staff recommends that the Board of Supervisors approve this application and accept the voluntary proffers. At this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicants are available as well.
Questions for staff? Not this time. Not at this time, but we may call you back.
I'll be back.
Thank you.
Probably not done yet.
Polster, back again.
Comments supporting from the commissioners for the approval of this, where the 100-acre of Deer Lake Estate property is proposed for the conservation easement. And so that's the upper third of this where the Deer Lake is. And part of that is none of the view sheds then from the adjoining houses would be impacted on that piece. There was a dedicated 8-acre parcel for the Colonial Heritage Homeowners Association for additional amenities. The fiscal impact sheet for the proposal is expected to have a positive effect. The overall maximum residential cap was 2,000 units remained. The land disturbance for the 150 lots ended up being the same as the approved 50 lots that we had in terms of any of the disturbance there. And the voluntary proffer of an additional of a residential entrance on Jolly Pond Road that was originally just an emergency entrance for EMS, fire, and police. The one dissenting vote was based on case number SUP 0003-215, where the board approved the rural cluster SUP to remove the central well requirement and allow for public water sewer connections for the Deer Lake Estate 50-lot rural cluster. The applicants assured the board in 215 that they did not intend to propose additional units in the future, and yet the applicant's 221 rezoning application does add an additional 100 lots to the Deer Lake Estate. Though it was a plus for some of the planning commissioners that the maximum residential cap of 2,000 units remained the same, the commissioners thought it unlikely that the final build-out would exceed the cap. A total number of 1,900 or less would be a plus with an attendant reduction in traffic on Centerville. The Planning Commission recommended approval of the application and acceptance of the voluntary proffers subject to the addition of a residential entrance on Jolly Pond Road by a vote of 6-1. Be happy to take any questions.
Questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. And our first speaker, Mr. Davis. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members of the board. My name is Greg Davis, Kaufman and Knowles Law Firm here in James City County. Pleased to represent Colonial Heritage LLC. With me tonight is Mr. Wes Dollins, who is the Director of Operations at Colonial Heritage, which is, of course, a subsidiary of Lennar. Project engineer is AES Consulting Engineers, and Ryan Stevenson is here representing AES tonight. Our traffic study was done by DRW Consultants, Dexter Williams. Just a bit of background for a little clarity on Mr. Polster's excellent comments and the staff's presentation. This is drawing of the existing Colonial Heritage development. You see on the right-hand side of the page where I have the black line is Richmond Road and the main entrance. Then on the southeast side is Centerville Road, and to the southwest is Jolly Pond Road. This light yellow colored area is the existing Colonial Heritage mixed-use development, age-restricted. And then this darker area to the left of the page is the 282-acre conservation area, which was dedicated as a part of the 2004 proffers. So in the middle is the property referred to as Deer Lake Estates, the 50-lot A1 cluster, which is now inside the primary service area. This is the proposal before you tonight, members of the board, what I call new colonial heritage. Again, you see Richmond Road to the right, and you see the light yellow color is the MU portion of the development. That MU now extends into a portion of Deer Lake Estates. But I would highlight for you the 100-acre parcel of conservation area added as a part of this application. This is contiguous to the 282 acres previously protected. It's next to the headwaters of Cranston's Mill Pond. It's in the Yarmouth Creek watershed, and this conservation easement protects that contiguous tree canopy that the Yarmouth Creek watershed focused on, and the undisturbed forest land there around Deer Lake. Also, as Mr. Polster pointed out, preserving views for folks who are currently residing or buying in this area of colonial heritage. Also point out the 8-acre amenities parcel, which my client has agreed to proffer for the homeowners association for future use. That use not yet been determined. My client is still working with the homeowners association as to what might go there. Could be an aquatic center, could be tennis courts or a pool. It could be something more passive associated with walking trails or the outdoors. The Colonial Heritage Homeowners Association supports this application for a number of reasons. First is the 8-acre parcel. As the development matures, the residents there see the attractiveness of having some additional acreage for amenities. The application includes a proffer to convey Deer Lake itself to the HOA. That's a water source for the golf course, but also an amenity for passive recreation, walking, birding, etc. But importantly, the application involves bringing in additional houses, additional residents into colonial heritage. Those folks pay a capital contribution when they buy a home. They pay dues to the homeowners association, and the hope is that they become users of the golf course and the restaurant facilities. In other words, more folks to support golf and the amenities there at Colonial Heritage. You heard this mentioned in the staff report and by Mr. Polster. I just want to talk about this subject straight up with you. In 2015, as a part of the comprehensive planning process and the special use permit to connect to water and sewer, my client was asked by the board, do you have any plans to expand the number of houses there? And the answer was no, don't have any plans to do that at this point. And that was honest. Colonial Heritage did intend to develop those 50 large lots. They had obtained a state permit for a private water system. They paid for engineering plans after 2015, which had been submitted as a part of your board packet, for the 50-lot subdivision. They completed a Phase 2 archaeological study and identified a site. They amended their wetlands permit and paid for wetlands mitigation impact credits. And they repaired the Deer Lake Dam, all after 2015. But something's changed about the basic assumptions at Deer Lake Estates. Several things, actually. First of all, large lots in a rural setting, the market has changed. They're not attractive to the market. We've seen that locally in some of our neighborhoods in James City County. Lennar, one of the largest home builders in the U.S., has seen it regionally and nationally as well. The demand for those houses is down. At the same time, the demand for the smaller product, which we propose in Deer Lake, has gone up. My client is finding that the home buyers coming to Colonial Heritage want a smaller lot. They don't want to maintain acreage. And they want a smaller home, smaller utility bills, less to clean and maintain. What's also changed is the Colonial Heritage homeowners have welcomed this change. It's unusual to expand a development and find that the existing residents favor it. But in fact, overwhelmingly, that's what we are finding here. Additionally, the Colonial Heritage leadership has changed. The new leadership team, including a new division president, knew the board's history with the 50 lots and Deer Lake Estates. and yet decided that bringing forward a new concept that's good for the environment, good for the county economy, good for the homeowners and the residents of the county was worth talking about. There's nothing sneaky or underhanded going here. This is my client bringing forward a good idea to discuss with county leaders. $100 more houses if this application is approved. But those are age-restricted houses, which means no school impacts, no school children, be 55 and over residents, just as in Colonial Heritage today. There'll be fewer residents per household. Our data shows that to be true. And then the Colonial Heritage proffer regime, very extensive proffers for cash, buffers, water usage restrictions, irrigation limitations would apply. These new active adult residents around Deer Lake would use the Colonial Heritage recreation amenities. There are swimming pools, there's aquatic center, there's a library, there's a woodworking shop, there's a clubhouse, so they don't place a demand on county rec amenities. And these active adults, while they might recreate inside Colonial Heritage, they come out and shop and dine and volunteer. They're a positive fiscal engine in the county because they bring those taxes and that spending without school impacts. They're welcomed by the Homeowners Association, as I mentioned. Mr. Leininger pointed out that the traffic study performed by our client for the whole development, not just Deer Lake Estates, reviewed by VDOT and the county's independent traffic consultant, said this additional 100 units are not going to affect traffic around the development. And then the final point on these more houses is subtle but important. Those 150 smaller units will disturb almost exactly the same amount of ground as the 50 large units. The 50 large units, the folks would want bigger yards, bigger house footprints, longer driveways, more roads within Colonial Heritage. 150 of the smaller homes, a fraction of the size in terms of the lot and the footprint, would have almost the same soil disturbance, same footprint in the environment. So members of the board, the plan before you is a better plan for the environment. It's a better plan for Colonial Heritage homeowners. It's a better plan for county coffers. It's a better plan for traffic. The staff and the Planning Commission agree with those statements. Yes, this land was once outside the primary service area, but it was always slated for development. This was never going to be forest that was pristine and remained undeveloped forever. It was never a farm that would remain open land. There were going to be 50 houses spread across it. This is a smarter redistribution. I would respectfully suggest to the board that its policy of using the PSA to limit growth should be flexible for projects that are in the public interest. And this is one of those. Finally, Mr. Chairman, in closing, let me say that Colonial Heritage and the Deer Lake Estates application tonight is not causing traffic problems on Centerville Road or Jolly Pond. But the staff report suggests that the applicant consider addressing the Centerville Road and Jolly Pond intersection. And if you're around James City County, you know folks are concerned about that intersection. Traffic's grown there. Schools are down that road. Our traffic consultant says the traffic light there meets warrant standards. It could be built, but there's no funding for it. It's expensive. No county funding available for that, particularly in these difficult times. So I'm here tonight, members of the board, to say to you, if it's important to your approval of this application, my client's prepared to proffer the funding of that traffic light at Centerville and Jolly Pond Road. There's matching funding available from VDOT. My client will pay the half of it, and if VDOT matches it, great. If VDOT won't match it, my client will pay for the entire traffic light. And do it as a show of good faith, do it in service to those school buses and those school children who are riding through that intersection every day, to those parents and athletic event attenders who are driving down Jolly Pond Road, and to those folks who've been affected by closure of Jolly Pond Road at the dam. Further, if there are other impacts that money might be addressed to satisfy the board's concerns about the impacts of this application, we'd be happy to have you defer tonight, send us back to revise our proffers for that traffic light or whatever that impact might be, and come back for approval. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll close my prepared comments, and I'd be happy to answer any questions which the board may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Just to follow up, if you would, please, would you explain again what the planned use for Deer Lake would be if approved?
Deer Lake would be used for several things, Ms. Sadler. First of all, it would provide irrigation water to the Colonial Heritage Golf Course. There's a proffer in place that prohibits using county water or well water to irrigate the golf course. Secondly, though that would be conservation area, passive recreation would be permitted under our proffer, so folks could take a walk down by the lake, take the grandchild down to catch a fish, that sort of thing.
Any other questions?
I just had one question.
ma'am.
How many of your units are current, how many homeowners do you have that live in Colonial Heritage now?
Right now, there are 1,280 homes, Ms. Larson.
Are most of them occupied?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, our next speaker, Sharon Witt. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you very much for listening to me. My name is Sharon Witt, and I live at Colonial Heritage, 6935 Chancery Lane, Williamsburg. And I have the distinct honor of have been elected to the Colonial Heritage Homeowners Board of Directors as one of the resident board members. I have lived in the Colonial Heritage for just 7 years. My husband and I moved to Williamsburg from the Washington, D.C. area. Just like many of our friends and neighbors, we came to Colonial Heritage because it's a retirement community for many reasons. It's an active adult 55 community. We have very active people there, love to play, love to do things. We love our tennis courts, our pickleball courts. We have indoor-outdoor pools. We got a golf course. We have over 60 clubs and interest groups that we all use. Inside, outside, we have a beautiful clubhouse and our restaurant we love. The homeowners here are retired. The majority of them are retired. So we have a lot of free time. So when we're not having fun, we like to go out and we socialize. And we also like to help in our communities. All of us, we're working people. And as working people know, you don't have the time to do volunteer work like you would like to. So we volunteer. A lot of us volunteer. Colonial Williamsburg, Jamestown. We go to the Yorktown. We volunteer at the hospitals, the food banks. We volunteer at all the churches. You will find many of your elected officials who I know are not volunteers, but you don't have to pay a lot of money for that, are residents from Colonial Heritage because we have the time to do it. We love the location. I talk to all my neighbors, and we have neighbors from all over the United States moving here. We have the historical triangle. We're not that far from the beaches, from down to the Outer Banks. We have the parks. We have a lovely area here in James City County and York County to enjoy. And it gives us opportunities to use our free time. And let me tell you, we love all the wineries. So we believe that our residents bring a lot of benefits to James City County. We are retired, so we have the time to volunteer. We also pay income tax, we pay property tax, and we pay real estate tax, and we have no burden on your schools. We love to go out and shop and buy things. We also, because we are retired, we have our small lots, but we do not want to have to do landscaping. We like to add additions to our homes sometimes, so we keep a lot of the local small businesses busy, especially nowadays. We also enjoy the William and Mary sports. We love to watch when we can do it, watch the sports. The addition of the 150 homes at Deer Lake will benefit our community by adding additional homeowners to help the burden. We have maintenance costs. We're a large community, we're growing. We're like a small city. But we have the time and the money to bring more in. It will spread the cost about to everybody. The additional homes will provide the money for maintenance, capital improvements for our operating funds, and allow us to put up new amenities. The offer Lennar has given us for the 8 acres, we're all talking about what we could use that for. We would like some additional, maybe athletic facilities. We'd love to have some walking trails, maybe a dog park. Deer Lake is important to us. As has been mentioned, we use Deer Lake to water our golf course, which, by the way, is an award-winning golf course. Come play it sometime. We need the water to water that beautiful lake. We also use it to water some of our grounds around our beautiful clubhouse. If you have not seen Colonial Heritage, come see us. We are very proud of our landscaping, and we try to keep it pristine. We like to have walking trails. We like to walk around. The idea of having the additional conservation land and an area, walk around Deer Lake, and be able to sit down with our grandchildren and have a little picnic, do some fishing. We just think that's wonderful. I've talked to many of my neighbors and my friends, and we all think this would be a definite benefit. And bringing in the additional retirement people to James City County will offer additional money to the county, and we don't put a lot on your services. So I fully support this rezoning, and I'd like you to think about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, our next speaker, Jeff Corbin. Welcome.
Good evening, Chairman Hipple, members of the board. Thanks for the time this evening to speak. My name is Jeff Corbin. I'm with Restoration Systems. We are a company that is the owner of Cranston's Mill Pond and the manager of that property. I've had discussions with all of you about our 4-year now effort, monumental effort to get a water withdrawal permit from the state to potentially use that water body as a raw water supply. Thank you for those conversations. So I'm honestly not at ease this evening. I don't like to be here to speak. I'm not in opposition, but raising concerns about something, because we are certainly not anti-development. We are not anti-colonial heritage, but we are an adjacent landowner. And we do have concerns, and we are going to be a very intimate adjacent landowner if this is approved. We'll be about 2,000 feet from the eastern head of Cranston's Mill Pond to where this zoning will bump out. We submitted comments to you all yesterday. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at those. I apologize that they came late, but one of the first things I wanted to mention to you, I have only 3 things to say this evening, and the first is we did not receive notice of this until January 13th. You probably all had the same kind of issues. I mailed Christmas cards in mid-December, and they got to family members the 3rd week in January. So the hearing on this was January 6th. We didn't get notice of it till the 13th. So that's why you're only receiving our comments now. Second, we have documented serious water quality concerns from previous construction phases at Colonial Heritage. This has happened on numerous occasions. We didn't report them. We wanted to be a good neighbor. And in August of 2018, I believe it was, the situation became so severe that we had to raise the issue to the county. And physical photographic documents are in our package. More houses, more soil disturbance, more impervious surface, combine that with heavier, more frequent rains, there is going to be downstream impacts. It's not a question of if, these will be occurring. So bluntly, we have documented that the existing erosion and sediment control and stormwater control practices that were put in place, at least at times in the past, did not work as they were supposed to. Thirdly and lastly, when we raised this issue, and this is what's honestly most frustrating to us as a landowner, when we raised this issue to the county in August of 2018, we did it professionally. We reached out to the county. We provided documentation. We told them we had some issues. We had some good discussions with inspectors in your Engineering and Resource Protection Department. But what happened 3 days after we raised this issue with the county, 3 days, we got a letter from Miami, Florida, from the legal counsel of Lennar, threatening us with legal action, saying that we had illegally trespassed because we used a drone to try and document where the sediment was coming from in our pond. So that meant we had to engage our counsel at significant cost, and you can read the letters are in the comments that we sent you. Their claims were baseless, but we had to engage our counsel. That's not how good neighbors work. And again, I'm not here to say no development, board members. I'm not here to say that maybe you don't even approve this zoning, but that's not how good neighbors work. So we are concerned due to that lack of, and again, the letter is in your package. We raised serious water quality concerns. All we got back from Lennar was trespass again and we'll take legal action against you. No acknowledgement of our water quality concerns. Nothing saying we'd like to talk to you about how to make sure this situation doesn't happen again. Simply trespass again and we'll sue you. So I leave you with this today. We'll follow this issue closely. I don't know if you're going to act on this evening, but all we'd be asking for is that if this zoning is approved and the construction happens at some point in the future, that additional protective measures are put in place. Because clearly, what's the minimum requirements for erosion and sediment control and stormwater did not work and likely are not going to work in the future when we have large rain events. So what we've asked for specifically is in our package, and I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, seeing no other speaker cards, I'll go ahead and close that public comment and look to the board for discussion.
I ask a question of staff. Whether you want to. And I may be picking on Mr. Holt again. Two questions. Number one, the documents we have, and I think the slide was shown, and it shows that what the current cluster, 50-lot cluster of Deer Lake is that was that a plat that was basically laid out when that cluster was approved?
Understanding your question.
Or was that just a conceptual? In other words, is that, how far along has that?
You're talking about the rural cluster?
Yeah, the rural
current
cluster
SUP.
that right now that it can be done.
Yeah, so they have gotten subdivision construction approval.
That one right there. Okay.
That approval is it's been stamped by planning staff and signed as a subdivision construction approval. So that means they met the major subdivision requirements within the subdivision ordinance. So that addresses stormwater runoff, street layouts, and then it also shows a preliminary plat. So the next step would be for them to submit a plat showing their lots. That would eventually get reviewed and then recorded. So it's kind of the in-between step.
So this is not if you will, a binding. This is just an example. I guess the reason I ask is because it looks like the lot sizes are fairly large size, which surprised me when you hear the word cluster. You know, you tend to think of smaller lot sizes clustered in an area to leave open space, and in this case, you've left one complete side of the lake apparently, but the other side looks like it's pretty well used. So, what I was trying to figure out is this plan, if it were to be developed as it is currently, right now, prior to this application, this is what we may or may not see. In other words, we would see an entrance off of Jolly Pond Road, but then the lots could be smaller. They could be laid out differently. Is that correct?
Not exactly.
Okay.
If they were to submit a plat that showed something different than the approved subdivision construction plan, they would have to restart that review and make sure it's compliance with the SUP and also any other subdivision requirements.
Okay.
Well, and just to put a finer point on that, to your question, Mr. Eisenhower, so these are fully engineered subdivision drawings that have been reviewed and approved by county staff. So, but for the plat that actually puts those property lines to record at the courthouse, they are good to go. Okay. So conceivably, they could come back and make some adjustments, but remember too, as part of that previous SUP cluster, there's also that binding master plan. So there would need to be that general consistency determination that was made. So you're not going to get big changes. They might come back and make some small tweaks, but again, that would require a significant another round of reinvestment in engineering. We'd still have the cluster master plan that it would be binding to. So this is pretty much what it's going to be.
My second question is, when I'm looking through this application, you don't see this kind of a drawing. You just see a land bay. So what it is, it's like a master plan where you have a land bay, and although it's been laid out in this one thing of where it was in light yellow, that this is where it would go. it hasn't been determined, or it would be determined at some later date, I guess. But the 150 houses would fit in. Because I couldn't find a plat like this for the new proposal, other than just the master plan, which said land bay, whatever.
Double check.
There's a conceptual layout.
The proposed master plan, yeah?
This is the one that wouldn't load on.
Yes,
Yeah.
it definitely
Yeah.
come close to breaking the PDF for
It
sure.
did. It sat and spun for about a half an hour on me.
Yeah.
Apologize for that.
Just, if I can just make a little bit of a comment on this. We haven't been seeing a lot of land use cases recently, as we've transitioned much more heavily to electronic transmission of these things. It is really hard to make any sense out of some of this. I mention that as plea to maybe recognize that
I agree with you 100%.
if we're going to be able to understand what's going on, we need to be able to read the numbers and see the topography and so forth. So,
These
and it's
really
not a
large master
criticism of
plan
the staff,
communities,
but
there's a lot of information for sure.
just reaction. I mean, I know we used to get huge piles
Piles
of
of
things.
paper,
Actual
yeah.
paper,
and
yeah.
enormous plans and
And spread it out on the dining room table anymore.
yeah, right. But somewhere, there's got to be a happy medium.
It's the other one.
This is it.
Okay.
To address kind of your question about whether it's fully engineered, this is the master plan.
Okay.
The next step would be to submit the subdivision construction plan with the engineered,
This is
Fully engineered
the
plan.
equivalent of what you had on the other for this proposal. And it was there all along, I just couldn't get it to load as it was.
Yeah.
Okay,
And-
I apologize, because I couldn't find it, and I couldn't get it to load on the computer.
That's okay. And just to orient you, because with the black and white drawing and all of the labeling here, I can't get the mouse to work.
north is,
The big road there on the left is Jolly Pond Road, and of course, then you see Deer Lake there on the right in the middle of the hatching, which would be the new conservation area.
So both sides, right, are,
Yes, up to the
Both
front.
sides of that part of the lake there on the left, yes, ma'am. Road wrapping around it there on the left, kind of paralleling Jolly Pond Road.
I was gonna, I wanted to, before we get into deep discussion and all that, I wanted to, it's been mentioned several times about the conversation we had at the last board meeting. And I wanted to pull that, if I get staff to pull that up and just review that in one piece when we discussed, and it was brought up, it wasn't an intent to trick us at all. So I don't want anybody to think this is any, thing to trick us, but just hear what we had talked about, originally, and the fact of that, my thought was on this, we'll save a lot for Colonial Heritage. We'll also get away from having a pump station that costs us money that we have to take over and causes the service authority to lose money on, which every one of them does. They're a little bit better, but they're not where they need to be. And also I want to know if we brought this into the PSA, is this it? And if I'd have known it wasn't it, I wouldn't have voted to bring it into PSA, because it opened up a lot more things that, now we're having to deal with. And so that was, I think that's some of mine. I've got a load of stuff I want to talk about, low density, and to me, I think of low density compared to what sometimes we're thinking low density is, and the board's intent and all that when we move this project into the PSA, and how now that's affecting us and having us to think a little bit different. Not that this project's a bad project by any means, and not that the thought of, I don't want anybody to think Colonial Heritage is trying to pull anything over on this board or the citizens. Not intended at all. But, you know, I asked that question for a point of, because I've heard it and seen it come before this board before. And I'm not saying that's their intent, but it's been, can I have this? And I mentioned it tonight too. Okay, what's the next thing do you want? And that's housing partnership. They're doing a great job. But, you know, if you don't ask each person and ask each one, what are you going to come back? And she was gracious enough to say, I'm going to come back and ask you for some more money right off the bat. I mean, that you couldn't be any more, you know, upfront than that. And you know, so that's why I was asking her as well on that. But, you know, the comprehensive plan calls for a low density residential. Inside the PSA, we put that in at the meeting. The traffic light at Jolly Pond is already warranted. If I add another 100 homes, no more traffic's coming out. And I open that up through the neighborhood, no more traffic's coming out. When we opened up Centerville Road, living down there, I saw how much traffic came out on Centerville. And some of it comes out pretty quick. And Jolly Pond, when I lived on Jolly Pond and the schools were open back in the good old days, we, you know, maybe wait in there 20 minutes to get out to Centerville to make a left turn. Right turn you could make without a problem. Left turn going back to 60 was an issue. With more homes, and I'm not against having an entrance on Jolly Pond, but there's going to be an issue with that road. And the citizens that we've already, the dam now, it's not our fault, the dam problem is already making those citizens go all the way around. It's going to delay them even further. I worry about Yarmouth Creek. I learned how to swim in Deer Lake. I lived over there at the Boy Scout camp when it was the Boy Scout camp, when it was designed to be a Boy Scout camp. And I lived over there, swam in the lake, learned how to swim in the lake. I worry about Yarmouth Creek. I worry about Cranston's Mill Pond and what that may do. I mean, how many times has Tommy Hitchens come in here and told us about the issues he's seeing all across the county? And I can't blame him. You know, I love a conservation easement, but there's, and it might be hard to say, but there's no tax in a conservation easement. It's good for the community, it's good for nature, it's good for the environment, but there's no revenue there. I like the fact that there's no school children in there, but also, you know, we're looking at police, fire, EMS and all that, which, you know, when you get older, as we're all experiencing it, we need that a little more. I mean, I needed my leg worked on. So,
Speak for yourself, sir.
Yes, maybe it's just me. So the 50 lots at low density, bring them into PSA, protecting the environment, protecting, getting rid of septic, getting rid of the well, getting rid of the water source there, and adding that in, I thought at that time was a good direction. So I was looking at protecting the environment. We're not doing any more than this in those 50 lots. And I said, great, you know, that's a good fit. It fits with our plan. And now can I slip another 100 into this 50? You know, I like the fact that the tie into Jolly Pond, because being a volunteer fire department, that's a big neighborhood. We need to get into that neighborhood. We need to be able to get to another port of that neighborhood. I have no problem with that tie-in. I have a problem with traffic and the volume and the light, and that's why. But access, we definitely need access to that neighborhood in that area. I don't understand, Tom, maybe you can help me. How do we consider a golf course? Now, I don't know if we ever have, and I understand that it's open to the public, and that's how it gets the 2080 calculation. But that's kind of a recreational. I mean, I could understand if it was a golf course standalone, but, and can that golf course, if if this all passes and we're using those figures and we're using the golf course, and in 10 years, the homeowner association says, you know what? We can't keep up with the volume coming through here. It's tearing our golf course up. And the golf course is for us. We didn't mind the general public using it when we were starting, but this is our little nest area, and we love our golf course, but we can't keep up with the maintenance with the general public, so we're going to shut it down. Does that 80-20 go away?
It would at that point. So we reached the conclusion that it was a commercial effort because of that very fact, the fact that it's a commercial operation open to the general public. We don't have another comparable one because all of the other golf courses are in the R4 district, and you don't have that same 80-20 split. So this is definitely a little bit of a one-off. I mean, you know, Stonehouse is PUD, Green Springs is R4, Kings Mill is R4. So there not really any other sort of comparisons out there. But again, with the way the ordinance is currently written, since it's open to the public and anybody can go in and use it as a commercial golf course, that's what made that trigger. But
if at some point it changed in terms of who was able to access it and it would no longer be commercial,
correct,
it's too late, right?
Correct.
Nothing can happen at that point.
Correct. It would become non-conforming at that point.
Right. I mean, I'd have to say that you know, it's kind of a problem for me to say. If I were thinking about commercial activities and economic development in the county, looking for a golf course would not be my first go-to. We've seen so many golf courses that have run into difficulties. And how does it play off against the recreation expectations?
In terms of the recreation calculation?
Yep.
I don't know that off the top of my head.
But does it count for both?
I don't know. I need to check.
Yeah, well, I mean, to me,
I don't know off the top of my head.
That's an issue.
I mean, I got a golf course next to my house. That's,
I don't. Do you mind if I just
you go right ahead.
A couple little things
Jump
here?
right
First of all, I want to thank Mr. Davis because he knows that I'm not a big fan of some of what's being proposed. I didn't support the last effort here, but to me there's some real issues here that make me a no on this matter. And the first is simply that you are talking about 3 times as many houses. And I understand tastes change. This is the second taste change that I recognize. Originally, Colonial Heritage was approved for 2,000 units on the expectation that a lot of them would be small lot or multifamily kinds of structures. And then you found that people wanted bigger pieces of property and larger houses. And so that's what you built, and used up a lot of the land that would have otherwise accommodated 2,000 residences. And now we're looking at another piece that was going to be 50, and now it's going to be 150. And so that tripling of the number of houses, the growth rate there, and the fact that just that slight representation that we saw here suggests to me that that's not low density residential. It may qualify on a strict reading of the ordinances, but it sure doesn't look like it to me. I'm quite concerned about the environmental issues, and in particular was distressed to hear Mr. Corbin's suggestion about it. But the golf course is the other part of it that just says to me, if there was an expectation of 425,000 square feet of commercial, then we should be expecting that. And this is kind of willingness to count something that I really just don't think, if we were being presented this as a new case, we would say, oh, sure, golf course is commercial property, commercial activity. Anyway, that's it.
I want to, if we can run that one tape there, I just want to see that again just to refresh my memory.
When was this?
This was 15, I think it
15.
was. Someone representing Lennar. Is there anybody that you can bring forward? Yes, sir.
You're representing Lennar?
I am.
Thank you, sir. And what's your name?
Joseph Rope.
Joseph, how you doing, sir? The benefit of this hooking up to water and sewer is definitely an environmental benefit. But as I've talked to my board members and other community members throughout the time, not y'all, but other applicants have come to us and said, we're only doing this. Mm-hmm. And the board goes, okay, that's all you're doing. And then 6 months, a year, 2 years, they change it to something else because with the comp plan and an A1, you're limited. But once it gets water and sewer, then that gets changed because to comply with the regulations we have in place, eventually that's going to come back to us and say, hey, it really doesn't fit as A1. So we really should change it to comply with all the other. I can see that coming down the trail, not from you, but just to keep us in compliance with everything we're doing. What is going to guarantee the citizens that if this goes, and I know all the stuff that's in place now, but if this goes to that, what's Lennar going to do, and what can they do to guarantee me, hey, we only want 50 there. That's all we're going to put. We just want the ability to hook up to water and sewer. What can you tell me?
Well, we already have a concept plan in place that we put on hold, of course, because of our application and all that. And Brian Stephen could speak to that as well. And I believe some of the members have seen the plan as well. But we actually plan to submit that plan in the very near future, depending on how it goes tonight with our application. And we're willing to, to dedicate the conservation area, sooner than later as well. And of course, we have our, our restrictions that are in place. I could say that there are no plans to sell the property to, change anything with the zoning. Those are guarantees, that we have in place here. I can't speak for the future or predecessors, but currently, we're waiting to start engineering as soon as we understand, the outcome of our application tonight.
Mr. Hipp, just to address that from a legal perspective, this being a comprehensive plan application similar to most of the other applications tonight, this is kind of step one. Even on an application as limited as this, we're requesting a PSA line move for the ability to apply to connect to public water and sewer. That would require a separate SUP. So it's not like we're making the decision tonight and this would be it. They can go tap into public water and sewer. They've got to come back to you with another SUP application asking to tie into the public water and sewer. That would flesh out the details of where it would come from within Colonial Heritage. There could be conditions put in place at that time. So there's another level of reviews for this. This is just one step of the process. So I think you've got another chance to address
Correct, but that would, in turn, I'm worried, opening a door. And I just wanted some reassurance from Lennar that we're putting in, and that's what I'm gathering from you. Is we're putting in 50 homes. That's all we're planning on putting in.
That is correct.
We just want to hook up to water and sewer to better serve the neighborhood and not have the wells and septic.
That is correct.
And that reassures me that, we're heading in the right direction. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
And that's where I was going from when I made that decision. And I think it was the right decision to, help the environment, put water and sewer and everything in there. Now, do I think Lennar has, wanted to change? I don't think there's any wrong doing here at all, and I'm not thinking that at all. And I understand, as you're going through business and you're making business plans, you change things and you move things around and you decide, okay, this is working and this is not working. But moving the PSA is very important. And, to move that, invites more growth into that area. And by doing that, I felt very secure with Lennar's statements and that, hey, we only want the 50 homes. That's all we're going to put in here. We just want to be able to tie into water and sewer. We don't want to hook up to the wells. We don't want to, or the central well. We want to have James City County well, and we don't have to put the expense in that. And that's where, up where that 8 acres is, was where that well site was going to be, if my recollection is correct. And, you know, and so it doesn't mean just because of that, I'm making this decision. That is not what I'm doing. It's, you know, the other things that come down, you know, adding 100 more houses, adding the road, the traffic light, the low density comprehensive plan, changing the PSA, the school bus and all that, and 20 minutes out on Jolly Pond. And so there's a lot. And then the golf course, you know, the 2080 comparison with the golf course. And if this passes tonight, like that passed the other night, and this passes, then all of a sudden if the golf course goes private tomorrow, there's nothing I can do. Nothing y'all can do. Nothing anybody can do. And I'm not saying Lennar would do that, so don't. But, you know, it's a tough job up here to make the right decisions and make sure we make the right moves. And is this protecting the company? Is this protecting the community? Is this protecting the county? How do we get through this? How do we make all this work and go together? Lennar's been a great company, done wonderful work in James County. Beautiful neighborhood. Beautiful neighborhood. Been through there many times. Y'all have a great neighborhood over there. And it's, y'all keep it wonderfully. All the amenities you have, can't say enough about it. Beautiful spot. And, but the only problem I have is where we're at tonight with, you know, the extra 100. So I'll let my other board members discuss more on their thoughts and feelings and where we are.
Well, I would just like to thank the citizens who've reached out. I've heard from quite a few folks who live in Colonial Heritage and surrounding area, and most I've heard from have been supportive of it. So I just do want to thank them for try to contact them all back. I may have missed some, but anyway, I just would like to thank everybody for taking the time to reach out and share their ideas. And I would encourage you, ma'am, to reach out to Peg Borman because she's looking for volunteers on the Clayton County Commission. But thank you for coming out and for sharing your thoughts and ideas.
No, go ahead. I'll finish wrapping up.
I can remember when the Boy Scout camp was originally sold. I remember when Colonial Heritage was approved at 2,000 homes, right before I took office the very first time back in 2006. It's a wonderful community. You know, it's very similar to the one I live in Ford's Colony. I guess the concern I have is what the citizens of this county have told us they value and they expect. And a lot of that is tied to the PSA line because they want the rural character of this community preserved. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Doesn't mean we don't have development. It means that how we do it and where we do it is what's really important. I've had several cases near my own community in Ford's Colony, which I felt pushed the envelope. It was always never enough. You had to go across a road. You had to annex. You had to get more. Bigger and bigger. And the argument for it was, well, it'll enhance the revenue base. Well, we found out that a residential revenue base doesn't pay for itself. Only the very, very, very high-end houses, that the actual average revenue we get from a house does not exceed the cost that we have to pay to support it. We have to have businesses to do that. So I'm always very, very leery about that. We've had cases in Ford's Colony where it's very close to the PSA, or in what is now A1 or R8, very rural density areas, even inside the PSA, where the density being proposed was totally out of character with what our people in the community were expecting. And I'm a little concerned about what has occurred over the years here with this piece of property, because first of all, you had a piece that was brought into the community, and then there was some outside, and they came to us and asked for the rural cluster, and I believe at that time we talked about they wanted to bring it inside the PSA, and the board declined back in 2008. I think in 2015, when I was off the board made the decision to go ahead and bring that piece of property inside the PSA. And I can understand the reasons that the chairman has articulated for, some of the thought process, the cost of a central well facility, a process that we have to then pay for, and it doesn't pay for itself. The rest of the county has to sort of subsidize that. So it was sort of attractive not to have the central well. And ultimately, when the decision was made to bring that land inside the PSA, that had lasting consequences. It's still A1, and it now has this rural cluster of 50 on it. But I was very, very concerned that what we were doing was slowly but surely changing or eroding the very nature of the community in general, out in our rural areas that our people wanted to look at. I will say that I have some real concerns on the environmental aspects. The watershed plan is sensitive in that area. Cranston's Mill Pond would be very easily impacted, and I will reiterate that I've had the same experience in Ford's Colony, where when they built upstream at premium outlets, we got horrific problems downstream. And I don't care how good you might think that the regulations the state puts in place and that we try to enforce on environmental quality and preventing, silt and runoff and erosion, it's never enough. It never works like we'd like it to. Every time there would be a heavy rain, I would get a complaint from somebody in my neighborhood about, it looks like the Mississippi down here. And you'd go find out, yeah, it's coming from this construction site, or it's coming from this spot. It just always happens. And I guess the minimum, what I would say is the minimum requirements we have to operate under from the state are not enough. It's inadequate. But that's the reality we have to deal with. I will say that one of the concerns I have is that the proposal only adds 100 houses, and it still has the same entrance on Jolly Pond Road. But what it does is it connects the rest of the community to that Jolly Pond Road exit. And we have had our problems with Jolly Pond, and it's going to get worse and not better. I appreciate the willingness to proffer for the traffic light, but I'm not sure that I would want to put strictly a dollars and cents parameter into making a decision that has more to do with the aesthetics and the quality of life that our citizens are expecting us to provide in this county. Sometimes it's short-sighted to chase a few dollars here and there if you compromise the essence of what you're trying to protect in the county. Ultimately, we'll make a decision tonight, and I know that there are a lot of folks in Colonial Heritage that really like this. They think it would be a good idea for them, but I hope that they will understand we appreciate their input, and we appreciate the input of all the citizens, but ultimately the decision we have to make has to reflect what we think is in the best interest of all the citizens of the entire county. Thank you.
I also want to point out that I have spoken to Mr. Davis regarding this matter, so My main concerns are traffic. I'm very concerned about traffic on Jolly Pond. Also in the environmental impact. Not that I need to, but I was really not weighing on this case, but I would hope that Lennar would want to be a better neighbor than that would appear to have been previously. I think when someone brings you some concerns, you should be wanting to hear about it. So I hope that in the future they will want to work well with their neighbors. Yes, no school children, and schools are one of our largest expenses, of course, as it is half our budget. But there are other strains on our things that we have here in the county. Our roads, we're getting less help from VDOT. There's considerable strain on our first responder services. So we just can't always dismiss something because there's no school strain. There's other strains that have to be considered. So those are the considerations that I'm taking in. Thank you.
Okay, then I'll look for the board for a motion on this proposal.
I'll move to deny the application.
All right, we have a motion for denial of the application. Ms. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Larson,
Yes.
Ms. Sadler,
No.
Mr. McGlennon,
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower,
Aye.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, next is SUP-20-0017 Williamsburg Crossing, Buster's Real Ice Cream.
Brewster's.
Brewster's, I'm sorry, Brewster's. I knew I'd mess it up. Thank y'all. I apologize to Brewster. Yeah, thank you.
That correction.
Thank you, Tom. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Caroline's Creamery, doing business as Brewster's Ice Cream, has applied for a special use permit to amend a previously approved SUP condition so that the business can build a drive-through lane adjacent to the existing building at 5289 John Tyler Highway. The property is zoned B1 General Business, is designated mixed use on the comprehensive plan, and is located inside the PSA. The parcel is adjacent to a section of Route 199 that is designated as an urban-suburban community character corridor. SUP-0002-1993 required a 50-foot CCC buffer along Route 199 to be undisturbed and free of structures and pavement. This SUP would allow for a drive-through within the 50-foot CCC buffer and still meet the minimum requirements of the zoning ordinance. Staff is recommending the conditions which are intended to mitigate the impacts of the use on the CCC buffer. Such conditions include providing additional screening and updating the lighting requirements for the parcel. No net loss of the buffer is anticipated. At its January 6, 2021 regular meeting, the Planning Commission recommended approval of this application to the Board of Supervisors by a vote of 7-0. Staff finds this proposal to be compatible with surrounding development and consistent with the 2035 Comprehensive Plan and Zoning Ordinance. Staff recommends the Board of Supervisors approve of this application subject to the proposed conditions. At this time, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and I believe the applicant is here as well.
Question for staff.
The only question that I had was, I worry about visibility because Brewster's is a busy place. So full disclosure, I'm a customer of Brewster's. I don't think that'll impact my vote tonight, but I do want to point that out. And I also, they're my dog's favorite place to go for their free dog Sunday. But I do worry right now the parcel to the right, if you're looking at what we're looking at, is empty. It's a former restaurant. it's not Bruster's fault. It's just a wonky sort of parking lot area. So I just wonder a little bit about the visibility and if that was talked about at all and how, if there were to be, that's the only issue that I see.
Yeah, so are you talking about screening from 199 or just
Not,
from
not
all of-
necessarily the screening, it's more the people turning into the Food Lion, going into Bruster's, coming out of Bruster's, possibly if they're gonna if this other parcel should get leased again, which we certainly would hope that it would, I'm just a little worried about the visibility, and I don't wanna see accidents there, so I just wondered if that was talked about at all.
I'm not 100% sure on that at the beginning stages.
Okay.
I can let Paul weigh in.
But there was a question at the Planning Commission by Mr. O'Connor, I think I remember correctly, when he inquired is the layout of that drive-through location and the way cars would go through the parking lot, is that the most efficient way? And based on the existing layout of the interior of the store and where you would go to reach out of the window, it's really the most efficient way that should work, and it will make use of those existing curb cuts on that interior way. So there shouldn't be a change in circulation. There shouldn't be a change in sort of how that area functions. Certainly the applicant hopes it will bring more cars to the site, but with the corresponding changes in the parking lot layout that were also included, they think it should work just fine, and it did not appear to raise any concerns at the time. Coincidentally, we do have a site plan in for redevelopment of that vacant building. So, yes.
Good news. Well, that means at least it'll get cut, which I'm sure boosters will be happy about as well. Okay, that, I appreciate that, and I guess I would just want should this pass, just want the applicant to keep, if we see traffic issues going on, that we're keeping an eye on that, because it is, a lot of people park over across the street and walk over and that kind of thing. So it's going to make for a congested area, I think.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Excuse me, is it going to be one way in and one way out?
Correct.
Like a circular?
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Mr. Polster. Last one of the night.
Mr. Holt already took my first paragraph. There was some discussion by Mr. O'Connor and the proposed driveway, and we in fact asked if there were some kind of different alternatives, and the parking piece that you talked about, and then if you swung around the back and then came back out with the parking, then how was that going to work? And so the other piece was the buffering between that and 199 and whatever impact with that additional driveway, et cetera, et cetera. The same things that you were concerned about were the same things that we discussed. Of interest to the commissioners was that the landowner, who's here, the owner and the applicant, purchased the property in July of 2020, last summer. As part of her research, she discovered that Bruster's real ice cream franchises increased their business by 50% with the addition of a drive-through. She was complimented for her optimism to start her business and her initiative to add a drive-through, all in the middle of this pandemic. The Planning Commission recommended approval, a vote of 7-0.
And I did read the notes from the Planning Commission. That didn't make it in there, so I didn't realize that it had been, I need to make sure that I tune in and watch the meetings live, so.
Well, one of our commissioners who is a Brewster fan, in fact, complimented her about that.
Thank you. No, I'm sorry, I was talking about the parking, the traffic situation, yeah.
Right.
That didn't make,
Yeah, Tim's pretty good about that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing and ask Carolina West, please come forward. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much. My name is Caroline West, and I live in Upper James City County. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you this evening and appreciate your consideration of this request. I'm a small business owner. I own the Parcel Stop in Monticello Marketplace, and I recently purchased Bruster's Ice Cream in July of 2020. In these challenging times, small business owners are eager to find ways to sustain their revenue. Franchise data shows that Bruster's that open drive-thrus on average double their revenue. A drive-thru at this location would provide a robust way for us to serve the public in a contactless environment. It will increase our revenue and expand job opportunities to James City County residents. Thank you again for this opportunity and your consideration of this request, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions?
I'd just tell you that I listened to the voicemails that were left in public comment, and I'm wondering when you're opening your Upper County franchise, because it seemed like everybody was driving from up your neighborhood down to.
Maybe one day soon, hopefully.
In Charles City.
Yeah.
But I got Charlie and Cody, two black labs. They're interested if there's a deal for dogs over there.
Up Cup, yep, free
You
to all
got it.
dogs.
Oh, yeah.
I would just say that your employees at Parcel Plus are excellent as well.
Thank you.
I recently read an article on you and the fact that you're a woman business owner in James City, and certainly appreciate the fact that you're willing to invest in our county by owning 2 businesses. So, and you heard my concerns about the traffic, so I would just hope that it increases 50% even more, but just, as long as everybody in that, if there is an issue, that you and the adjoining leases can take a look at that and see if there's a way to make anything better that might be a problem.
Absolutely.
Well, I was listening to the voicemails today, too, with my 9-year-old grandson, who jumped up and said, "Ooh, I support that." So no influence on me there, but just saying, thank you for what you do for James City County, and you provide a wonderful service and excellent, excellent ice cream. So
Well, thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, close that public hearing and look to the board for recommendations, discussions.
I'll move the motion.
Okay. Ms. Go right ahead.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower. Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, there's no closed session. Mr. Stevens, you have anything you want to bring up? There's nothing in our thing for that. I didn't know if you had anything that was.
Mr. Hippel, the only thing I would mention is we have had a lot of questions about vaccinations and how does the public get that, and what about CVS Pharmacy, and what is going on in our area. And as we've reported before, the peninsula localities have opened 3 clinics in partnership with the Department of Health. Our clinic at the Colonial Williamsburg Visitor Center has been very successful in its first almost 2 weeks of operation at the end of this week. We have mostly vaccinated public employees based on guidance of VDH. We are moving to scheduling of the clinic through VDH. They are going to reach out to those that have registered on their list that we have been sending residents to for the past 6+ weeks, to reach out to them to schedule 700 of those in our clinic this Friday. So I think there'll be some more movement. We're trying to figure out how they prioritize that list. There are a lot of residents throughout the peninsula area or health district that have registered. And so we're trying to figure out their priorities so we can share that with the community as well and understand what's going on there. But our clinic has been very successful, and I think it will continue to grow as vaccine availability increases throughout the, country and the state. The other thing with CVS Pharmacy, we've been asked, what do we know about that? We know very little. As I understand it, it's coming from a federal program directly to the pharmacy, so it's not being run by the health department. But what Dr. Norm Oliver shared today on a call was that it's an additional 27,000 doses to Virginia on top of the 129,000 that we're currently getting each week. So that's a good thing. I also know we're trying to capture the military and federal staff that are being vaccinated through the federal government as well. That number is significant for Virginia. We're trying to get it by locality so we have better information. 4 weeks ago, I would have told you we were really far behind the state. If you look at the data today, we are really doing very well, even though there's still a lot of frustration out there. We have over 17,000 residents that are shown on the VDH website as being vaccinated in James City County. We are 20% of our population. The state's average is about 10. So I think our efforts have made a difference. But if you're one of those still waiting on when, I understand there's still a lot of frustration, and what we're trying to do is, again, have that information. And I just want to reassure you and our members of the community that your staff is still very engaged with the Department of Health on a daily basis, multiple times, many days, and we localities are still talking amongst ourselves on a daily basis between your emergency managers and your chief administrative officers. And I believe it will get better and better, but we still have a few more weeks before I think it'll iron out and we can really give you, your appointment can be this date and time, because that's what people want to know. When can they get their appointment? So with that, I'll close and see if you had any questions beyond that regards to vaccinations.
Questions? I just thought I'd mention a couple of quick things, and I appreciate all the hard work that you've put into it, that staff has put into it, that Chief Ash has done, Assistant County Administrator Reinheimer, and all of the folks who are making this clinic work successfully. And I think once we are able to get more of the public into it, that will be a real plus. And I guess we said 700 doses this week will be administered on Friday.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I noticed, and I'm glad that you brought attention, I don't think people will be happy until everybody who wants a vaccine can get the vaccine. But it is important to note, as you did, that roughly 20% of our population have already received vaccination, at least the first dose, and that Virginia is now ranked 8th in the country in terms of percentage of the population that have received vaccinations. So in a very short period of time, we've moved from 50th way up there, and we're doing better than the state as a whole, so I think that's good. But again, it will only be satisfactory once everybody who wants to be vaccinated gets vaccinated. I took the opportunity of an email from Craig Pfeiffer today to just ask him a couple of quick questions, assuming that he would respond to them tomorrow. Instead, within about 3 minutes, I got an email back. It was mostly about the CVS program, and what I had hoped was going to be a coordinated effort between VDH and CVS, where CVS would operate off of the VDH list. But apparently that's not the case, that people, when they register for CVS, will have to say that they are over 65 and that they have placed themselves on the VDH list, but it's just kind of your word situation. It would be much nicer if we knew that we were dealing with people in a more rationalized, prioritized way, but, you know, we'll take the extra doses, I suppose. But,
I think the increased numbers and that more success is a direct result of you all working on our behalf. So thank you again for that.
Absolutely.
I was just going to say that I think that one of the reasons Virginia is where it is because localities really stepped in and
pitched a fit.
Yeah, and got involved. So because I know the amount of time that it has taken up. I know what time I've taken up of your time. So I'm really appreciative. I am worried though, because it's hard to know what priorities, if there's any priority going on. You know, if you're 65 and you sign up, but somebody's on there that's 100, you know, with more health issues, or the 65 has more health issues. So that piece is a little bothersome. Today on the news, I heard that they were going to open, I think it was maybe the Peninsula, they were going to have volunteers that were going to help people who could not get appointments because they had no idea how to use. By that point, guess what? Those appointments are gone. I just checked, CVS throughout the state of Virginia, fully booked, every one of them. And so, I mean, yes, I'm grateful for the 27, I was on that call too, 27,000 that came through, but I do think there is a large majority of the population that does not know how to use this. I speak from experience with having a parent that does not use technology. So, as I told you, I accidentally registered myself instead of my dad. And then I had to go back and say, Williamsburg, Ruth Larson accidentally registered herself. But I don't know if anybody ever saw it. But anyway, so I think Supervisor McGlinnan is right in that until everybody that can get one gets one, there's going to be problems. And I heard them say today, I think it would be April, right? Until the majority of Virginians had gotten their first, or we had gotten through 1D.
Through 1B, I think was a reference to April, was getting us through these first, because there are a lot of Virginians in that 1A and 1B classification. As they've expanded the groups that fit in there, it has opened up a lot of people.
Okay. So while I'm so appreciative of our efforts, I do think there's unanswered questions that we can't answer, but I hope they are looking at. And was he one of your students? Was Craig one of your students? And well, that's impressive. And he probably has heard of your reputation, so he wanted to answer you back.
That's right, absolutely.
Yeah, there was probably one of your students in there. And then I apologize, I was going to ask one more vaccine question, but it has completely, anyway, I just hope we continue to make progress. I really appreciate what we're doing and I also want to thank our employees and the WJCC employees that have gotten vaccinated. I think that's really important. And, I think the governor has now encouraged schools to get open by March 15th in one way or another. I think our schools are due to open next week to start doing a hybrid program. So kudos to our employees and to the WJCC staff that is getting vaccinated. That will help. So.
Well, and if I could just add, there's a lot of thank yous that are owed. We still have a long way to go and a lot of progress to be made, but I'd also want to thank our employees that are working on their days off. We have a number of folks doing the vaccinating that it's their day off. They didn't plan to be here, but they've been willing to come in and provide that service, and I expect that to continue for many months for them as well. So I just want to give them credit for working with us and through it as well.
Yes, sir.
I had one other thing I just wanted to bring to the board's attention. I think I'd mentioned to you before that the Community Services Coalition, which runs the building over on Waller Mill Road, did come to an agreement with Child Development Resources, and we have signed a contract to sell the building to them. And that process will the closing will probably take place in mid-July. We are hoping at that point they will pick up the operation of the building, and the last of the tenants should be vacating about August, and in August they're looking to start approximately about a $6 million renovation to the building, which would then allow them to consolidate their entire operation there. Wow. We are also working with all of our tenants who are leaving the building and helping them find spaces to relocate to. So that's one, helping them to a great extent on that. I just want to let everybody know that.
Maybe you have something.
I did. I had a follow-up COVID question, and then I did just have one thing I wanted to mention about I wondered if you could give us, or welcome to send it. Can you just remind me of what the COVID protocol is with employees, and will it change if an employee has been vaccinated? Have we heard anything from CDC that if someone who's been vaccinated fully and they get exposed, if that will change? I don't know if they've even sent anything out yet or not, but I'm just curious as to our plan.
I'll probably have to follow up with you on some of that. We currently are requiring our employees to do a daily screening of things that are COVID related. So we have, if they answer yes to any of the items that are out there of temperature or sickness or sore throats, or if they answer yes to those, we have a protocol in place that pretty immediately they're isolated, asked to leave the workplace, not come if they're feeling that way, but to call. And so we're doing those daily, and I think we have 500 plus doing those on a daily basis, which is a pretty good representative of what we have on staff most of the time. We do have employees that are still some teleworking where we have space in the office where we can't spread them out enough. We have some in today, we'll have a different group in tomorrow, but they're working 5 days a week. I see us moving away from that sooner as we get these vaccinations and we start getting second doses, that we'll start having more of our workforce back in the office on a regular basis and get to some normalcy in the coming months as far as that goes. We'll continue to follow the CDC guidance, and if somebody comes into the workplace sick, if you've been vaccinated, I would expect you have a different protocol than if you maybe have not been, but we'll try to work through that. And we have had some leave programs that we've extended to the end of March that I would think that were related to COVID that I think will expire at the end of March for us. I mean, that's the expectation. Employees still have their paid time off, their vacation and sick leave balances, but the extra leave related to COVID, I think we will have extended that far enough when we get to the end of March. So as that changes, we'll update you. I expect there'll be some changes. I just don't know what those are at this point.
So can I just follow up on that for a second? Sure. Because obviously, if people are getting vaccinated, they're not necessarily avoiding infection, right? Or they could still carry to someone else, right?
Well, I think the answer is I'm not sure. I certainly have heard the medical professionals say that is a possibility they're unsure of.
Right.
Are you safe from transmission, or are you a carrier and you just don't get sick?
Right.
So there still will, I think, be some protocols that will come out of what's the right thing to do from a CDC
So I guess
guidance.
the
and we
question
follow
I would
those.
really have is there any consideration being given to increased testing, especially now that the federal government has made an arrangement to purchase a large number of 15-minute tests, home tests that are being out there? Question.
I think that is something that gives us better data quicker, and that would certainly be my expectation. Is we'll continue to do the testing for a period of time. We certainly don't want to have an outbreak in the workplace where we can avoid it, and having that information relatively quickly is helpful in that.
Thanks.
Is now an okay time to, this is not.
Board, we can do.
Is this-
You can do whatever you want.
Okay,
You're on the
I
board.
just wanted to, a constituent of mine, Tommy Turner, had sent me some information about a resident of James City County who passed away on January 20th, 2021. And her name was Mary Barb. And she was, I think, 101 when she passed away. But she was born in a small town in the south of France, which is where she spent her childhood. And she moved to Paris to live with an aunt after the early deaths of her parents. But what was remarkable about, well, she was a remarkable person, but one of the things that made her very remarkable is that she joined the French underground and later worked with the OSS, the predecessor of the CIA, and her secret work included helping soldiers and airmen trapped behind enemy lines to escape through underground networks. And she did that using forged Algerian identification papers. And by doing that, she saved the lives of countless soldiers by smuggling them back to Allied territory. And she lived in Windsor Forest for over 40 years. She also lived at Camp Perry. And then when she was living at Morningside, I believe, when she passed away. But she was married at an immediate post-war period. She met her husband, James, then in France with the American Army. And after early assignments in Germany and Belgium, the couple returned to the United States, where she attended Rutgers, was made an American citizen by a special act of Congress, and later intelligence work took Mary and Jim to the Pacific Islands, 2 tours of Vietnam, and in Mary's case, for an extended stay in Hong Kong. But with returns to Camp Perry and Williamsburg between overseas assignments. But apparently, she was known all around Williamsburg. She became well known to hundreds as an honored attendee at food and live entertainment venues in Williamsburg, like J.M. Randall's, Buffalo Wild Wings, Golden Corral, and the Williamsburg Lodge. At the first 2 venues, she excelled as a trivia game competitor, and at the Lodge, she could be found enjoying the Smith Wade Band on Saturday nights. She continued those activities even after she moved into her assisted living facility a few years ago. And her 100th birthday celebration in 2019 at the local VFW post attracted an abundance of friends from both nearby and as far away as New Mexico and Canada, who came to honor her as a friend and an American patriot. So
That birthday party.
yeah, so I really appreciate Tommy bringing this to my attention, and you just never know who's living among you, but here's someone who really performed very brave acts to save the lives of people that she probably did not know. So, anyway.
I read that in her obituary. And,
Okay.
And I was like, wow, this lady's done so much.
Yeah,
It was
so-
incredible what she accomplished.
Yeah, so thank you for letting me bring that up.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
And let me do my board
Yes.
request, and it is in the same vein. You know, we've seen with the COVID situation how much regional cooperation there is. Our partners in the city of Williamsburg, our former mayor Jean Zeidler lost her husband Ed Crapehole, and Ed was a very inspiring teacher and scholar in the history department at William and Mary. And just want to offer sincere condolences to Jean on that loss. And Mary Lee Darling and her husband Jock Darling died within days of each other recently as well. Mary Lee served for a number of years on city council. So again, to their family, our condolences.
Great people. All right, I'm looking for an adjournment until 1 p.m. on February 23rd, 2021 for a business meeting.
So moved.
So moved. Roll, please, sir.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Ripple?
Aye. We're done.